This is Atomic Shinobi and today I'm going to narrate what if Naruto has Juubi Kurama sealed in him and accidentally goes to DXD universe. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Not wasting no time, let's start the story.
Naruto woke up slowly and was in excruciating pain from the strain on his body. He sensed a tremendous amount of power that had not previously existed, indicating that the sealing had been successful. After taking a moment to gather himself, Naruto began to look around and exclaimed, What the hell happened? It's odd that he ended up in a forest. Was the power released so strong that it carried him away from the battlefield? As he slowly stood up, he exclaimed, Damn, that hurt like a son of a bitch. Glad it's over though. If this doesn't make me Hokage, then nothing will. He would go see his animal companion because he needed answers. He eventually reached the location where the great Kyuubi lived by walking down the hallway in his mindscape. Oi! Kurama, what happened when I was knocked out? The great beast answered, I don't know, brat, I'm just as clueless as you right now. Naruto glanced up at his partner, who had 10 tails swaying slowly behind him, orange, reddish fur, and the same red eyes. Hold on, 10 tails. Naruto screamed, Kurama, what's with the extra tail? Naruto simply looked at his partner and began to perspire. That's great, Kurama, but where are we? What happened to everyone? I can't even sense any chakra, Naruto said, as Kurama smiled almost evilly. Looks like I absorbed the Juubi. Now it looks like I really am the most powerful being in existence. Bawahahaha. Kurama ceased to laugh. That is strange, I can't sense any chakra either. I don't know what to tell you, but I have really great news for you. Naruto was definitely intrigued by this. Yeah, what is it? Kurama smirked and said, Look down. Naruto arched an eyebrow, but he followed his instructions and peered down into the sewer water, whereupon he was immediately astounded by what he saw. His once blonde hair, which had been exposed to the sun, had turned snow white with a hint of gray. What the fuck? He exclaimed, examining his hair in the water as he moved it from left to right. Kurama was simply chuckling. Kid, I'm the new Juubi and you're my host, which means you get some new traits. Besides your hair, you also have the Rinnegan. Naruto, the Rinnegan, was stunned. It was quite unexpected that the world's most powerful dojutsu was under his control, but it appears that Kurama wasn't finished yet. Also, I have no idea what happened, but it seems you really have surpassed my father. You're immortal. That got to him deeply. Everlasting? It appeared so unthinkable, so unattainable. He stared into the water, contemplating, for several minutes. This implied that he might be killed instead of dying from old age. Even though he had Kurama, he didn't believe life would be worthwhile without his friends. Would this imply that all of his friends would perish and he would simply continue to lead a pointless life? He sighed, knowing that he would solve the problem later because he had to return to the others. He waved over his shoulder and said, I guess that's good, but I need to find the guys. I'll talk to you later. He returned to reality and began to make his way out of the forest. He gaped openly at what he saw as he came out of the forest. People in business suits, cars speeding down the street, enormous buildings that stretched for miles, and technology everywhere. Naruto gasped, wondering where in the world he was. He could claim that he was no longer in the elemental nations from wherever he was. Kurama uttered the words, What in the name of the six paths? In his mind. Kurama gave a feeble laugh and said, It seems like we're in a different world, huh? Naruto swiftly hid behind a tree and retreated into the forest. A different world? What do you mean? It isn't totally impossible that all the power released created a rip through space and we traveled through it. Naruto shouted in his head, Okay, but how do we get back? Kurama uttered a humble, I don't think that's possible. For a minute, Naruto's heart stopped. He still had to be Hokage, he still had friends to see, he still needed to speak to a certain blue-haired girl. There had to be a way back. Kurama, stop lying, there has to be something, anything. He essentially pleaded with the powerful being. Kurama kept quiet for a while. In all my years of living, I have never been in any situation close to this. The only way to go back to our dimension is to seal something with equal power to the Juubi. It can't be me, since if I were to leave your body you would probably die. Even though you're immortal right now, I'm the one giving you immortality. Even if we can find a beast in this dimension that is as strong the Juubi, we don't know if he'll just accept being sealed. Unless he is evil, we can't just take away something's freedom. If by an off chance we do find a creature that fits, the possibility to land in our dimension is 1 to infinity, he stated. In other words, he was fucked. If the Juubi could travel through all of these dimensions and locate a creature with even half of its power, he would be a unique creature. Kurama was also correct when he said that we couldn't simply lock someone or something up without their consent. He wouldn't do that for personal gain. Since Sasuke wasn't present either, there would be less opportunity to seal it as well. What were the chances that he would wind up in the elemental nations, even if they were lucky enough to catch him? He might not even come close if he continued this cycle for millions of years. Oh no. Naruto couldn't help but cry as he collapsed to the ground, leaning his back against the tree. All of the blood, sweat, and tears he put into his training were in vain because he would never be Hokage. The one thing he had been aiming for since he was 5 years old, his lifelong dream, was out of reach. Lost. Perhaps he could cope with losing his job, but what about his friends? No, he couldn't survive without his friends, with whom he had developed such close bonds. Despite their frequent taunts when he was younger, they continued to accept him when no one else had, giving him something to defend and something to fight for, which prevented him from sinking into a void of loneliness. These included his surrogate mother Suande, his first crush and best teammate Sakura, his brother Sasuke, who was his brother in all but blood, and his other older brother Kakashi, who was likely the funniest, most pervy, and most fierce person he had ever encountered. Lost. In the name of love, Hinata gave her life to defend him against someone who could destroy entire villages with a single blow. As a child, Naruto's only wish was to love and be loved, but since he was perceived by everyone as a demon, this never materialized. However, despite the fact that he was the village outcast, this girl continued to focus on his positive traits even when they were young. She did this while witnessing him swoon over Sakura, and she continued to do so throughout the years until she was essentially trading her life for his in the fight against pain. The war was about to start by the time he had accepted her confession. By the end, he hoped to ask Hinata out on a date and see how things worked out, but now was his chance to find love and the happiness he had always desired. Lost. It was too much for his heart to handle. Naruto, snap out of this. I know this is hard and that you'll miss everyone, but you can't let this destroy you. Everyone back at home is praising you right now for what you did. Without you there would be no elemental nations. I might not know much about friendship, but I know that all the friends you had would want you to live your life happy. This is new chance, Naruto. A new life, a new adventure. And no matter what hardships you face or whatever problems you come across, I'll always be there for you, Naruto, you're my friend, Kurama yelled with power. With a startled expression, Naruto looked up at Kurama's slowing down. A smile slowly spread across his face. Kurama was correct. Uzumaki Naruto had always desired adventure, and this was a completely new kind of it. Additionally, he was aware that Kurama would always be there for him in times of need. You're right, Kurama, I'll honor my friends and live life to the fullest, and we're going to be so badass the world is going to recognize how amazing we are. He screamed into the sky. Kurama smiled. Who knows what this world has to offer? Naruto shouted, Shadow Clone Jutsu. 2 seconds later, a group of Narutos appeared. All right, guys, go out and learn more about this world. He shouted. Yes, boss, they all exclaimed as they took off in various directions. With a sigh, he turned back time to discover what this world had to offer. Once more, he came out of the shrubbery and onto the sidewalk, where people were strolling. Because he appeared to have just left a combat zone, which he actually did, he received some strange looks. He couldn't help smiling as we gazed up at the tall skyscrapers. This was going to be really amazing. A random Japanese man bumped into him while he was standing. Watch it, you stupid asshole, the man yelled. Perhaps it would be a little challenging, Naruto sighed. After a year, Naruto had become extremely knowledgeable about this world. Even though the humans were very intelligent, they were so weak that a 5-year-old clan member with very little training could defeat them. It's likely that the technology used here won't reach the elemental nations for hundreds or even thousands of years. Trains, automobiles, phones, and a lot more. Although there was a lot to process, money was necessary to indulge in anything, and sadly, they did not steal his world's currency. This is where he discovered another issue. In order to obtain employment, he had to be a citizen. Otherwise, he would be considered a criminal in the nation. Even though he was academically proficient in genjutsu, it wasn't that difficult because all he needed to do to obtain a passport and other documents for himself was to practice. When you had clones working several low-paying jobs in various places and a new book series called Tales of a Gusty Ninja, money wasn't really an issue. He was living a comfortable life. However, he had to learn a variety of skills, such as how to operate this technology and drive. Actually, it was fortunate that he had shadow clones. He also put in a lot of training. Kurama was attempting to help him master his Rinnegan, and because he has all the elements, he also has wood style. Unfortunately, Kurama found it difficult to learn many of the other styles because Hashirama was the only one he had seen. Additionally, he was able to replicate his father's Hiroshin. Although he wasn't a seal master, Jiraiya did impart some sealing knowledge to him. Kurama was a huge help because he was essentially the second person to witness it in action because he was imprisoned inside his mother. And once more, I adore the shadow clones. Naruto had generally made an effort to keep a low profile, releasing little power unless absolutely necessary. However, he did experience strange feelings when he interacted with certain individuals. Even though it wasn't chakra, he still felt strange around some people. He also discovered that attendance at school was mandatory for anyone under the age of 18. Now, Kami kill him. He detested school. Haruka's lessons at the academy had been so dull, but what was worse was that you couldn't even skip them without breaking the law. He learned that the hard way when a policeman asked Naruto to drive him to school, but he had to refuse the officer's request because he didn't actually have one. He was now standing in front of Kuo Academy, a school he had gained admission to thanks to his impressive, fake, test results from previous institutions. Prior to this year, it was exclusively for girls, but it has since switched to co-ed. Since it was the nearest school to his apartment, he simply went there. He couldn't help but feel a little excited as he stood in front of the school, wondering how it would be and how many new friends he might meet. Everyone turned to look at him as he entered the room. The boys, particularly a trio of boys murmuring something along the lines of, "another pretty boy," watched with jealousy as the girls blushed slightly. However, they had the right to do so because Naruto had a very slender figure, and you could see that he had a lot of muscle beneath those clothes. You could lose yourself in the deepest ocean blue that was his eyes. His hair was uncommon. In fact, Naruto has never seen anyone with silver hair in all of Japan. Nevertheless, it contrasted well with his eyes, and since the headband had been removed, his hair extended slightly above his forehead, making him the center of attention. The cherry on top was his whisker marks, which left everyone wondering how he got them. The girls thought it made him look even cuter, despite the fact that some might find it strange. He couldn't help but overhear a conversation as he was moving down the hallway. "Who is he? Another pretty boy here to take all the girls. He looks hot. He kind of has the same hair as Kaneko-chan." He gave them his trademark Naruto smile while some girls were whispering to each other, causing them to blush and giggle a little. He turned and headed to his homeroom class after observing in confusion. Everyone glanced at him once more as he entered the classroom. "Class, we have a new transfer student, Uzumaki-kun. Why don't you introduce yourself?" said the instructor. He greeted them with his brightest smile, saying, "Hello, my name is Uzumaki Naruto, and I look forward to being friends with all of you." His amiable demeanor also seems to make the class smile. "That's great, Uzumaki-kun. Why don't you take a seat behind Gremory-chan?" said the sensei. Following instructions, Naruto sat behind a girl with stunning crimson hair. He had to exercise caution around her because he always felt that way when he encountered certain people. "Hello, I'm Rias Gremory, Naruto-san," she said courteously. He shook her hand and said, "Please call me Naruto. I don't like the honorifics. I hope we can get along." "Yes, I hope so too," she said with a small smile. The next hour was arguably the most dull Naruto had ever known. After the bell rang. Cheers to school. Naruto had been doing well in school. He didn't particularly enjoy math classes because he thought they were just a bunch of meaningless numbers, but he was surprisingly interested in science and history. The rest of his classes were extremely dull, and he couldn't believe that people in this world actually survived attending school until they were 18. However, this world had a lot of interesting history, including wars and other noteworthy events that really piqued his interest. Naruto usually just dozed off during these classes, but he still managed to achieve excellent grades. Being a shinobi, he had long since learned how to process information after hearing it just once, so it wasn't difficult for him. He could easily absorb a lot of information even though he was essentially asleep. In case anything escaped him, he also had Kurama. His primary goal in this new world was to solve his first puzzle, even though his grades were probably the best in the class. There were many strange emotions present. The power emanating from some people felt malevolent and evil, but he was never able to detect any trace of rage or malice in them. Rias Gremory was one of the great Oni Samas of Kuo Academy. She had gorgeous red hair that reminded him of his late mother, bluish green eyes that he had to admit looked pretty, and such a voluptuous figure that the men couldn't help but stare at her. Kuo's other great Oni Sama is Akeno Himejima. She most likely has a more attractive body than Rias, her best friend. Her long black hair was tied up in an orange ribbon and extended past her butt. Orange, sexy violet eyes that sparkled with innocence and somehow seemed to be the exact opposite. With a bust size similar to Grandma Tsunade's, she was likely the most attractive girl in the academy in his opinion. The prince of Kuo, Kiba Yuto, was a short-haired man with blonde hair that was a shade lighter than it had been. Gray eyes that were anything but drab. He had captured the hearts of the girls. The girls would follow him everywhere. Like himself, He had a fairly pleasant and kind disposition, but Naruto was a bit more easily agitated. Nevertheless, the girls were beginning to show interest in Naruto as well. He was fairly certain that Kaneko Taju, a small, petite girl, was a first-year student here. For some reason, she had been designated as the mascot of the school. Despite some uneven patches, her snow-white hair still had a nice appearance. She also had a black cat clip in her hair and cat-like hazel eyes. She didn't have the same sexy appearance as Rias and Akeno, but her cuteness more than made up for it. The president of the student council, Sona Shidori, had captivating violet eyes and short black hair, but unlike Akeno, she lacked the long hair that dazzled the boys at school. Even though he essentially had a cheat sheet for every test or quiz, she was a really smart person vying with him for the top spot in the class. He discovered other individuals who also felt odd, such as the student council, but he didn't think they were that significant. He was unable to identify the supernatural quality that all of these people possessed. He was aware that, aside from the teachers, these individuals essentially controlled the school. The close relationship between Sona, the president of the student council, and Rias, the president of the ORC, may indicate that they were collaborating. He had no idea what was going on. All he knew was that these individuals were the school's hierarchy and might be attempting to do something negative. He watched them whenever he could, but he saw no indication that their actions were wrong. The only things he heard them discussing were contracts and similar topics. After all, Naruto defeated the Juubi, so he was confident he could manage whatever it was. However, he occasionally noticed Kaneko staring at him strangely, which caused him to feel a little uneasy. Issei Hyodo was the other person who piqued his interest the most out of everyone. Most likely one of the most egregious perverts Naruto had ever encountered. He believed that Issei was most likely Jiraiya's reincarnation, but he was perhaps even more thwarted than Jiraiya. Issei publicly declared his love of breasts and ass from the rooftops, while Jiraiya would primarily try to hide it. He never really took things seriously, and it's likely that he couldn't think straight for 5 minutes without coming up with a perverted thought. Issei wasn't particularly disliked by Naruto, who actually found most of his actions hilarious, such as the kendo club handing him his ass. The strong force he sensed within Issei was what truly caught his attention, despite Issei's perviness. Even though Issei appeared to be quite weak, there was something or someone very strong inside of him. Was Issei, like him, a Jinchuritsuki? He was unsure of what to believe, but one thing was certain: he would uncover this mess. Line separation after school, the entire student council and occult research club assembled in the student council meeting room. Greeting Rias with a smile. "Hello Sona. I trust everything is going well." Sona adjusted her spectacles. "There seems to be some minor disturbances in the area. We suspect they might be fallen angels, but we don't really know. But aside from that, yes, we're doing very well in dealing out contracts to people." Rias replied, "That's good, we are doing well also, and we're still looking out for the right time to recruit Issei." Sona crossed her legs and asked, "You're quite eager to get him to be Upon still, huh? Could it be for something special?" As she gave Sona a fierce look, Rias said, "Don't get smart with me, Sona. You know more than ever that I need peerage members." Sona sang, "I suppose you do. Maybe this commotion with the fallen angels could be what you're looking for to get your chance," Sona murmured. Rias was about to get up and leave when a girl with white hair said, "But Shu, I have some news you guys may want to be aware of." Kaneko spoke in a monotone. "Well, if that's all, we should be going." Kaneko nodded. "I have been observing Uzumaki Naruto." Rias sat back down and looked at her rook. "Sure, tell us, Kaneko-chan." Rias raised an eyebrow. "The new transfer student that's jeopardizing Sona's spot as number 1 in the junior class," she said with a smirk, drawing a look from said girl. She was curious, so she said, "Yes, I found out something strange about him." "All right, tell us, Kaneko-chan." Kaneko nodded again. "He can use chakra." Even though she spoke in a careless manner, everyone's eyes widened because it was unheard of for a human to use chakra. Only species belonging to the Yukai faction were able to do so. "Are you sure? Is that even possible?" she asked. She gritted her teeth and said, "Yes, there was no mistake, it was chakra. I also found out he could use senjutsu." They were definitely surprised now if they weren't already. Only Kaneko's species and Monkey Kings were able to use senjutsu. Given that senjutsu has the power to corrupt and drive people insane, how could a human use it, let alone chakra? If that were the case, they would need to exercise extreme caution around Naruto. However, if Naruto did possess senjutsu, he would be a powerful addition to her peerage and greatly increase her chances of defeating Riser. "That is a surprise. I actually had my eye on Uzumaki for some time," Sona said. Rias asked, "Oh, you have? And tell me, why is that?" "I had no idea that he could use chakra or senjutsu, but he had muscles that no human being could ever achieve. His speed and agility are probably way above that of a professional athlete. It was as if he could be some sort of superhuman solider. He looked like a good candidate to add to my peerage, replied she. She stated thoughtfully, yes, he does seem to be a very special candidate. Rias, you already have Issei. If anything, Naruto should be a part of my peerage, Sona sternly said, staring at her. You owed me Issei as a payment from a favor, but Naruto is up for grabs, Rias said with a sly smile. Don't get her wrong, although she considered Sona to be a friend, she was still competing with her for the best pieces. Rias stood up and left the room, her peers trailing behind her. You guys be careful around Naruto. We still don't know if he is a threat yet. Keep an eye on him. If he doesn't look dangerous, we wait until we recruit Issei and ask Naruto if he would like to join along with him, she said. Together, they exclaimed, "Hi, bucko," breaking a line. After a week, Naruto felt as though something life-altering was about to happen while he was in class. Why did bad things always happen to him? The Occult Research Club and the Student Council had been keeping a closer eye on him lately. Did they discover he was pursuing them? No, that was not feasible because he expertly concealed his tracks. Perhaps when he experimented with some of his more potent jutsu during training a week ago, they felt a slight surge in power. He had no idea, but the fact that everyone was staring at him made him feel very uneasy. With a sigh, he hoped that whatever was about to happen wouldn't be too terrible. Someone waved a hand in front of his face, startling him out of his reverie. Naruto, pay attention man, I'm trying to tell you a story. Issei screamed. Yes, they had become friends in spite of the girl's constant protests that Naruto had become infected with Issei's perviness. At least in Naruto's book, he always accepted people as friends with ease, but Issei may have only considered him to be an acquaintance. Naruto leaned on his hand and gazed out the window, saying, Sorry, I was just thinking of some stuff, that's all. What could be more important than peeping on the swim team? Their oppai is so amazing, dude. Could you imagine being in the middle of all that? His expression was dreamy. With a sluggish wave of his hand, he said, I don't know, maybe your future, what college you might go to, studying, and a whole bunch of other shit that will actually get you somewhere. Normally, Naruto would scream at him or make fun of him for being a pervert, but today he wasn't in the right frame of mind because he had too much on his mind. Furthermore, even if Naruto told him to stop, he wouldn't exactly stop. Don't be ridiculous. What is life or any of that stuff without the wonderful thing that is the female body? I can't just let you go on blindly. Maybe I should take you with us sometimes to watch some girls. Issei was pointing his finger in the air. He answered, No thanks, I'm not really like that. After examining him closely for a while, Issei pointed a finger at him and said, Don't tell me you're gay. How could you not love girls? It's blasphemy. With a horrified expression, numerous listeners watched in disbelief. Naruto was about to yell at Issei for saying such a thing when his head shot up. He was damn straight. However, the bell rang and class began before he had a chance. Sigh. Well, it was time to go to bed. He would vent to Issei later. By lunchtime, Naruto's thoughts were largely clear and he was feeling better about his circumstances. He saw his perverted friend, Matsuda, and Motohama, collectively known as the perverted trio of Kuo, surveilling the kendo club as he was making his way to the lunchroom, reflecting on how well he had performed on his most recent test and how much he loved the praise he received. You would think that after they beat you 100 times, they would fire you, but no, Jiraiya was also like that. Normally, he would overlook this, but since he turned genin, he hadn't pulled a good practical joke. Naruto swiftly scaled up the closest building to the kendo clubhouse and yelled, Stop peeking on those girls, you pervs. After taking out his hidden ninja wire and setting it up behind them, there was a lot of girlish screaming coming from inside the kendo club room. Now that they knew they had been discovered, Issei and his companions leapt back and began running in the opposite direction. It operated flawlessly. In a matter of seconds, the men were caught in the wire. When the girls emerged, they were shocked to see Naruto standing atop a roof and a group of bound perverts. One of the girls asked, Naruto-kun, what happened? These guys were trying to peek on you. Naturally I couldn't let them do such a thing without getting punished, nay. He said, his trademark Naruto grin still fixed on his face. It didn't help that he had a smile on his face as the girls blushed, seemingly touched that he would shield them from some guys trying to get a glimpse of their bodies. They replied, Thank you so much, Naruto-kun. Before turning to leave, he grinned and said, No problem, but go easy on them today, okay? Mercy. Please. Shouted Motohama as the girls turned to face their victim with a smile. Nope. They said, grinning menacingly. The screams of men could be heard in the background, and Naruto laughed. It was too much fun. He had forgotten the fun of pulling practical jokes. He noticed someone leaving the lunch area as he glanced around. It appeared to be Kaneko heading for the occult clubroom. Since lunch wasn't over for another 20 minutes, he made the decision to follow her in the hopes of learning more about their recent movements. He hopped from rooftop to rooftop until he finally reached the top of the clubroom, where Kaneko entered. Silently, he lowered himself and entered behind her. He put his ear to the door and heard some conversation. "Are you sure?" A voice that sounded like Kiba asked. A voice that was unmistakably Rias said, "Yes, it's confirmed, there definitely is a fallen angel in the area." What the devil was that? Fallen angel? He had heard of angels, but no one was certain if they were real, and even if they were, why would they be here when they should be in heaven? Perhaps their falling had something to do with it? A monotone voice asked, "What are we going to do?" After a brief period of silence, Naruto quickly vanished. "Nothing like Sona said, this could be our chance. Let's just see what happens, everybody just go back to lunch." He was thinking about what he had discovered when he reappeared in the lunchroom. What was happening? A fallen angel. What was it? He was going crazy over this. Now he had no choice but to wait. The following day, even after requesting Kurama's assistance, Naruto was once more gazing out the window, trying to make sense of everything that had transpired over the previous few weeks. All he needed to do was bide his time until this fallen angel appeared. Issei remarked, "Naruto, you're zoning out again. For the 1000th time, Issei." "I don't care about whose boobs you saw," Naruto said, turning back to face Issei. Naruto's eyes widened in disbelief and he appeared to freeze. "It's not about that this time, I actually have a girlfriend." He exclaimed in horror, How is that even possible? What girl would want a perv like you?" "Hey, I'm not updatable, you know. I'm just more open about my thoughts," he exclaimed, attempting to justify his actions. Issei crossed his arms and sighed. "Of course she's real. Her name is Yuma and we have a date tonight," he said with pride. "Still, it sounds unbelievable. Are you sure you didn't make her up?" He pumped his fist. "I'm so going to get some action," he exclaimed. "How exactly did you even convince her to go out with you in the first place?" Naruto asked, sweating as he watched. "Are you sure she's not just some assassin disguised as a girl trying to kill you?" Issei simply stood there proudly, responding, "I didn't she ask me?" I guess. Issei utterly rejected his implausible assertion, saying, "Nah, don't be stupid, why would someone do that?" The bell rang, and all of the students took their seats before the discussion could continue. Naruto fell asleep for his quiet hour. Naruto was returning home after a protracted search. Naruto couldn't help but look for it after all the talk about a fallen angel to see if he could sense it or not using simple chakra sensing and tracking. He didn't really want to use senjutsu because that would likely draw even more attention from the research club. As he was making his way home, he heard a loud squelch coming from a considerable distance thanks to Kurama's super hearing. He sprinted as quickly as he could and arrived at the location in an instant. There, with a spear of light, his eyes widened, was a girl with long black hair and a very skimpy outfit. What stood out the most, though, were two black wings that protruded from her back. A fallen angel. The sight of Issei Hyodo's lifeless body at her feet, however, stopped him cold. Even though Issei wasn't one of his closest friends, he was still his friend, and he hoped to start over here without losing anyone. He believed he had the power, the fucking Juubi, for crying out loud, but even so, he was too weak to defend his beloved people. He was filled with rage. Why the hell? "Oh, another weak human, huh? Looks like I'll have to kill you too, I don't want any witnesses." She spoke. "You're going to pay for killing him," Naruto yelled as he looked up at her. "Oh, was he a friend of yours? It's okay, you'll be meeting with him soon." She laughed and raised a light spear, expecting to finish it in one shot, but to her mild surprise, he sidestepped and avoided it without even blinking. She called forth two more light spears and hurled them at superhuman speed. He vanished from view and then reappeared in front of her, shocking her once more. He punched her hard in the stomach before she could react, sending her hurtling back into a tree. She screamed, How the hell did you do that?" He didn't bother answering because he was about to move on when he abruptly stopped and sensed four previously unheard presences. Why had they come here? He would speak with them later because they didn't appear to be attacking him. Once again, he focused on the fallen angel. He screamed at her, "Why did you kill him? He hadn't done anything." She got up, summoned another spear, and flew in his direction while growling, "It doesn't concern you, human." He pulled out a kunai and followed suit. When she slashed at him with his kunai, they met in the center. He brought his kunai to block the blow, but you can only imagine how shocked he was when it was sliced right through. After bending over to avoid the blow, he kicked her in the chin with a back handspring. She wiped the blood from her mouth and charged at him once more with the intention of stabbing him. She flew up in the air and remained there flapping her wings until she could regain her bearings. This was like fighting a 4-year-old to him, and he wasn't going to let it happen. He took hold of her wrist and gave her a devastating right kick to the head. This time, she flew back, going all the way through a tree. Wow, if he's this strong without the evil pieces, then I wonder how strong he would be with them, Rias Peerage thought as they watched in disbelief. Despite the fact that this was a low-class fallen angel, a human shouldn't even be able to match this level of power. Her other peers had similar thoughts running through their minds. Rias could barely control a human this powerful with chakra and senjutsu, which didn't appear to be driving him crazy. If she managed to capture Riser, she would undoubtedly be able to defeat him. With a hint of fear, the fallen angel asked, "What are you?" As she slowly sat up, her face covered in blood. "Why did you kill him?" he exclaimed as he approached her slowly and grabbed her by the neck. "I was sent by Kokabiel. He ordered me to kill him because of his sacred gear." Naruto made a perplexed expression. What the hell was a sacred gear? Oh, he seemed to uncover a new mystery each time he discovered a clue. Naruto turned around just in time to see a flash of red as there was sudden movement. He released her neck and turned to face the area, but it appeared that Issei was no longer there. A voice said, "I'll pay you back for this, you pathetic human." Before a circle formed beneath her and she vanished before he could look any further. He took another look around and saw that Issei's body was no longer there. With Issei's body, what did the occult want? Were they aware of it and attempting to conceal it? Or were they to conceal the entire incident? He had no idea what to do because no one would believe him if he had no proof. By this point, Issei's body was in an unknown location, so he had no choice but to return home, leaving behind more questions than he could possibly answer. The following day Naruto entered the lunchroom wearing a somber expression because he had not slept well the night before. He had hundreds of questions and nightmares about disappointing his friends. "What do you mean you don't remember her? Her name was Yuma, remember?" was said as he entered the lunchroom, and his head jerked up in response. He stared in disbelief at the speaker, wondering how it was possible. Naruto was certain he was dead. But there he was, alive, and it was Issei in the flesh. Motohama answered, "Nope, I don't remember her. I think you made her up, bro." As Issei opened his mouth to respond, Naruto nearly threw him to the ground. When Naruto was examining him for wounds, he made a noise that sounded like a yelp. He slapped his hands away and screamed, "Naruto, what the hell are you doing?" Instead of answering, Naruto pulled him outside, and his friends shrugged their shoulders and resumed their conversation about tits. Naruto uttered the words, "How the hell are you alive?" loudly. Before realizing what Naruto was talking about, Issei appeared perplexed. "So it wasn't a dream. I knew Yuma was real, but how did you know that she tried to kill me?" he asked. "She didn't try. She did kill you, and I know because I walked onto the scene after it happened. But do tell me how you managed to come back from the dead," he said in a similar voice. He had another perverse fantasy, saying, "I don't know, one moment it was black, then the next I'm waking up with a naked Rias next to me." Was he somehow saved by Rias and her club? Why would they act in that way? Before he could think any more, he sensed Kiba's strange aura approaching them. Issei asked, "What's up, pretty boy?" with a slightly irritated expression. His smile said, "Hello Naruto-san. Issei-san." Naruto narrowed his eyes and asked, "What do you want?" "Easy, we mean no harm. Bucko was just wondering if you guys would like to talk to us after school today in the occult room after school today." His hands were raised in the air. Even if this was a trap, Naruto would Rasen Shuriken the clubhouse before allowing Issei to die once more. "Sure, we'll be there," he replied, grinning back. This could be Naruto's chance to finally get some answers. Waiting the remainder of the day was all that remained. Naruto and Issei met Kiba outside as the last bell ringing the dismissal of the students sounded. He said, "Follow me to the clubhouse," and they began to move in that direction. They blushed when they heard a lot of water coming from behind a curtain as they sat down inside the clubhouse. The president herself was the only person left behind the curtains since Kaneko, Kiba, and Akeno were all present. They patiently waited for Rias Akeno to arrive with tea and begin serving everyone. He thought it was great. It was most likely the best tea he had ever had. He grinned and exclaimed, "This is great, Akeno. Era, thank you so much, Fox.kun." She smiled sweetly. He actually kind of enjoyed it, despite her attempts to make fun of him. Foxes were his favorite animal, second only to toads. At last, they heard the war coming to an end, and Rias emerged in her school uniform. She said kindly, "Hello, Issei-kun. Naruto-kun. I hope you're comfortable." Naruto put down his teacup and said, "We're great, but I want to cut to the chase. We both have questions to ask," while Issei was practically staring at her. Her sigh was followed by the words, "Yes, Well, I should have expected this, but I guess we'll just get to it then. Naruto gave her a hopeful glance. Issei's eyes widened as black, like wings appeared out of everyone's backs. We're devils. Naruto wasn't sure if he should have reacted more strongly to this, but after witnessing enormous snakes and toads, people being raised from the dead, and a creature capable of trapping the entire world in an illusion, he wasn't too affected. He laughed weakly and said, "So you guys aren't going to take my soul or anything, right? No, relax, that's a common misconception about us devils, we don't go taking everyone's souls for the fun of it." Rias laughed a little. Naruto relaxed a little at that, but tensed up again when Issei yelled, "How the fuck did I get these?" He screamed as he ran hysterically in a circle and tried to look at his new accessories. Naruto appeared perplexed and a little upset that they would transform people into devils. Rias giggled sweetly once more and said, "Yes, we should explain, we turned Issei into a devil last night. You see, after we determined you didn't need any help dealing with the fallen angel, we saw poor Issei was dead. My position allows me to recurrent the dead, turning them into devils with these," she stated while displaying a few chess pieces. Examining the red chess pieces, Naruto questioned, "Why would you create something like that in the first place?" There was a great war between the three great factions, the devils, angels, and fallen angels. All sides were devastated by this war until finally we called a ceasefire. A little while after, there was a devil civil war between the old Satan faction and the anti-Satan faction, who opposed the war-like ideals the previous faction held. The anti-Satan faction eventually killed the four great Satans, who were the leaders of the devil faction, and replaced them. One of our leaders, Beelzebub Sama, created this evil peace system and distributed them amongst high-class devils to reincarnate humans as devils in order to repopulate our people, since we were in danger of dying out. There are different pieces: rooks, which give the devil super strength and increased durability; knights, which give the devil increased speed; bishops, which give you increased magical power; the queen, which gives you attributes of all the others except the king; and finally pawns, which can be promoted to any of the ones I mentioned except the king. She finished her long explanation. He gazed in wonder. After just a year, he had already discovered some bizarre things. In addition to learning about this evil peace system, he discovered that these legendary creatures were real and had a rich history. This was a completely different world that was apparently hidden from the locals. Raising people from the dead was forbidden in his world, but it was a common occurrence in this world of mystical beings, which kind of fascinated him. They also acquired these rather helpful skills. One half of him was skeptical, while the other half thought this was fantastic and was thankful that they had saved Issei and given him new abilities. However, this sounded too good to be true. There had to be a repercussion. He asked, still looking at the pieces, "What's the catch?" She grinned. "You're pretty smart, not like I expected any less from one of our top students. I wouldn't really call it a catch, but the system is designed so you would serve under the king, which in this case everyone here serves under me," she said. He scowled because he thought that sounded a lot like slavery and he didn't want Issei involved. "That sounds like you're forcing them to be your servants," he replied. Rias appeared to be upset and hurt. "No, everyone in this peerage is my family. I wouldn't keep them on a leash unless they deserve it. Also, everyone here has enjoyed being part of my peerage except Issei for obvious reasons. The king piece was put in place to make sure we didn't let reincarnated devils run willy-nilly doing whatever they wanted," she replied with disapproval of his entire theory. A grinning group of empty teacups said, Era, it's true, Bucko has taken care of all of us." Kiba nodded and said, "I'd probably be dead if it wasn't for her." Kaneko quickly remarked, "It's dope." That made Naruto smile a little because it sounded good to have your own small family that looked out for and protected one another. "You also possess some clever skills." He pondered what it would be like to possess Grandma Tsunade's strength without resorting to sage mode. But he didn't really need it. Since it was similar to the idea of a village, he could see why they also needed to place the king piece. Despite having your own liberties, you were expected to be devoted to the village. You were arrested and executed if you broke any rules or betrayed the village. The thought of genuinely entertaining him was, to be honest, similar to Konoha. But what did these devils do? Because they could sign him up if he wanted to go on some awesome missions. It sounded like fun to be active with a cool group of friends. She smirked and said, "I see you're interested." Rias sighed, realizing that most people had a similar reaction to Issei's before he could even open his mouth. "But I don't want to be a devil. This is crazy." Issei butted in. She grinned and said, "With girls." Issei's mood abruptly changed, and he exclaimed, "Why, you mean I can actually be harem king?" With stars in his eyes. "You know, one day you could be a high-class devil and have your own peerage." His narrow-mindedness caused everyone to perspire. "Actually, since we're talking about Issei, I'm wondering what that fallen angel wanted with him," She said she killed him because of his sacred gear. He inquired. In response, Rias said, sacred gears are special things given to humans and humans by God in order to enact miracles on earth. We believe Issei has a particularly powerful which could be part of the legendary 13 Longinus. It has been said that they could slay gods and that made him a target. This shocked Naruto, who wondered if Issei could be as powerful as the Sage of Six Paths. He was not entirely sure. How do I use it? Asked Issei, who also had a shocked expression on his face as he began to examine himself. She turned to him and told him to imagine the most powerful stance you can. Goku from Dragon Ball performing his signature move is the most powerful stance, huh? His expression was focused as he pondered. She said, you got it? He gave a forceful nod, and she said, good, now take that pose and copy it. Everyone in the room arched an eyebrow, as if Issei was having trouble with this in some way. Then, without warning, he leapt to his feet, raised one hand in the air, and yelled, activate. Everyone stared at him as if he were a complete moron, with the exception of Rias, but then a strange green circle appeared above the middle of the back of his hand, resembling a gauntlet made of gold and red. While examining it, he exclaimed, whoa! This thing looks cool. The others were equally impressed and curious about its potential. So, I'll just say this now, I want you in my peerage, Naruto. Rias turned back to Naruto as Issei was flinging punches and examining his new sacred equipment. She crossed her arms beneath her breasts and pushed them upwards. Given how stunning she was, Naruto couldn't help but blush. When he first saw her on his first day, he was already mesmerized by her gorgeous red hair. His Namikaze genes are cursed. Kurama snorted from inside his head as a voice said, I can't believe you actually were about to agree like that. The most powerful man in the elemental nations getting tempted by mounds of flesh. So pathetic, just as he was about to agree with her breasts pressed together. Naruto shook his head to get his mind straight after realizing what was happening. He questioned, why would you want me? Rias pouted, appearing a little annoyed that she was unable to entice him. Kaneko. Chan sensed that you can use chakra, and not just that senjutsu too. She continued. He appeared somewhat surprised by that, but if he could sense them, it shouldn't have come as a huge surprise that they could sense him as well. Just curious, you can use it right? Was an attempt to determine whether Kaneko's assessment was accurate. He grinned arrogantly and said, yeah, that's right, I can use it. As though to support his claim, he sat motionless for a few seconds in the lotus position. The others watched in confusion until they noticed that his eyes were surrounded by a reddish, orange pigment. In an attempt to demonstrate some of his senjutsu infused power, Naruto pushed out a small amount. They were barely able to withstand the enormous wave of power that suddenly hit them, but it also felt pleasant, cozy, and protective. Akeno wanted to take him right away, but Kaneko couldn't help but let her ears and tail grow and purr softly while grinning contentedly. She rubbed her thighs together and licked her lips, barely controlling herself from the strength he was radiating. Unknown place. While strolling down an alley, a black cat suddenly sensed a familiar power in the air. It looked up at the sky and thought, this power seems so strong and familiar NYA, before taking off. Clubroom for research. The rest of his classmates were in awe as the pressure subsided. You didn't get the pigment that Naruto did when he used senjutsu, according to what Kaneko told Rias, though she wasn't sure what had happened. Perhaps it was his humanity. Rias wasn't sure she could reincarnate him if he had any other tricks up his sleeve, but the power he released was at least high class. As they sat on the couch, Akino's blush was disappearing from view and Kaneko pouted at the loss of warmth. He remarked, pretty sweet, huh? So what do you say, Naruto, want to join? We could use someone with your abilities and another member of the family, Rias said kindly, nodding slowly. After giving it some thought, Naruto seemed to see no drawbacks. He had friends who didn't seem particularly evil, and he had no idea what adventures he might have with them. Sure. Sign me up, Rias. Chan. He exclaimed with a big smile. Naruto nodded and lay down on the closest couch after Rias gave it back and said, lay down on your back so we can do the ceremony. With a night piece in her hand, Rias approached him and laid it across his chest. Rias Grammary command the Uzumaki Naruto to rise and serve me as my knight. Embrace your new life as a devil, she shouted. Achievement. Well, whatever. It didn't work out. She muttered, well, that was weird. She took out a rook this time and followed suit. Nothing. Bishop. No, not at all. She looked at the pieces and yelled, damn it, I was afraid that this would happen. What's wrong? He asked. She sighed. This system works so that the number of pieces correspond with the amount of power a person has. For example, I had to use all 8 of my pawns on Issei because of his sacred gear. She was saddened, to be sure, But since Issei took all 8 of her pawns and all the pieces she used on Naruto added up to 3 pawns, it only meant Naruto was extremely strong. When he perfected the scared gear, Naruto might reach Issei's level or even queen level. Her peers appeared to understand this as well. They were unaware that Issei most likely wouldn't be able to match Naruto even after he realized his full potential and that a queen would not even come close to reincarnating him. That would explain it, he thought, realizing that he had neglected to mention that he was essentially a god. Some things just slip your mind, he surmised. After giving it some thought, he realized that boasting about his power wasn't a good idea because it would attract too much attention and most likely make people not want to see him. With hope, he said, "Oh, well, this doesn't mean we can't be friends, right?" She would not be so cold as to turn someone away simply because she couldn't have them in her peerage. She sighed again before smiling and saying, "Of course we can still be friends. In fact, you're welcome here anytime you like, seeing as you know our secret." Additionally, this only demonstrated Naruto's strength and his potential as a useful ally. "Well, that's great and all, but can you tell me what to do to become harem king?" Issei intervened. Era eager are we," she said sultrily as Akeno giggled. The Akeno at school was always kind and innocent, but Naruto appeared perplexed. A chill went down his spine as Rias went on. "Humans summon us and we complete their desires in exchange for a pact with them though. Also you have the right to decline just like Kiba did when that girl asked him to take her virginity." Issei exclaimed, "Sweet, give me a client but shoo." With excitement, she handed a massive stack of papers to an astonished Issei and said, "Nope, you have to hand out these flyers first. This is how humans will summon us. All of these have to be handed out before you can take jobs." Naruto exclaimed, "Good luck with that." As he left the room. "You're not gonna even help me, Naruto." The following day Naruto was running beside Issei, and it appeared that he could actually do some work now that he had gotten rid of all the summoning papers and Issei had finished distributing flyers. Issei attempted to teleport there, but it turned out that his magical reserves were so low that he couldn't use a magic circle. Although Naruto could have benefited from one, he chose to run alongside Issei as he rode his bike because he didn't want to leave him alone. After 20 minutes of riding, Naruto didn't even appear tired, so Issei asked, "Damn Naruto, how long can you keep that up for this long?" "Please, this is as easy as counting to 10, he responded. Naruto nodded and said, "I guess it's to be expected, you showed us how strong you in the research room." Although he disliked hiding his skills, he was capable of handling it. It took them a few minutes to reach their destination. Leaning against a fence, Naruto said, "You can go and do whatever you devils do, I'll wait here." After giving a nod, Issei went upstairs to the summoner's apartment. As he stood there gazing into the sunset, Naruto pondered how much would change now that he was working with the paranormal. After 10 minutes after some time, Issei emerged, looking horrified and dejected. Naruto said, "Hey, did you get the contract?" as he moved away from the fence. "Does it look like I did? No, that creepy ass man wanted me to dress up in some princess girl costume, there's no way I'm doing that," he shouted. Naruto simply chuckled at his bad luck and said, "Good luck telling Rias." Naruto experienced the same emotion on the way back as he did upon seeing Yuma. "Stop," he exclaimed. "What man? My mom's gonna kill me if I don't make it home for dinner in time," he and Issei screamed to a stop. Ignoring his worries, Naruto said, "Can you just shut up for a minute?" He spun around in time to see a girl with purple hair and a red cloak approaching them slowly. "Who are you?" Issei wondered. Her voice was dark as she said, "My name is Calawarner, but that is not important." "What is though is how you're still alive." When a pair of black wings appeared from her back, the couple's eyes appeared to enlarge in response to that statement. Naruto said, "A fallen angel." She summoned a spear of light into her hand and said, "She was supposed to have taken care of you already. No matter, I'll just finish you here." "Watch out!" exclaimed Naruto as she suddenly hurled it at Issei with lightning speed. Naruto swiftly tackled Issei to the ground because it appeared that he was too slow to dodge. The fallen angel was able to catch a glimpse of Issei's hand during this event. "Servants from the House of Gremory, that'll just make this more the worthwhile." Naruto acted swiftly, drawing a pronged kunai and hurling it in her direction. It was so off target that she didn't even try to dodge. "Haha, you plan to get rid of me with some fancy-looking knives, not to mention your aim is shit. I knew devils were pathetic but I expected better," she chuckled. It ended abruptly when Naruto smiled, vanished in a burst of yellow, and then resurfaced next to her. She spat out some saliva after he gave her a hard kick to the midsection. She touched down a short distance from Issei. She charged at Issei and yelled, "You piece of shit. Whatever, I don't need to deal with you, the stupid punk with brown hair is all I need to kill." Naruto swore to himself, "Issei, get out of there. He should have realized that they would pursue Issei because that's what it appeared that all of these angels wanted anyhow. When Issei remained motionless and lifted his arm into the air, Naruto became frightened. He kept thinking, think of something strong, think of something strong. Then his weapons changed into his holy armor and started to radiate green energy. Whatever Issei did, it worked. The fallen angel was hit by a series of green beams that tore off her clothing. Before taking off into the sky, she made an irritated sound while floating in midair and said, I don't need to deal with this. A guy who can teleport in a sacred gear, I'll let someone else deal with this shit. Breaking a line, Issei and Naruto returned to the clubroom in record time to cover the incident. They could tell Rias wasn't happy by the expression on her face. This is bad now. Not only do they know that you're still alive, they also saw your scared gear and that you've been resurrected as a devil. Nonetheless, I suppose it was unavoidable. Just be careful, Issei. She concluded. Issei gave a nod. Naruto, I heard that you used some sort of teleportation magic? She inquired. Akano abruptly appeared behind him, putting her arms around his midsection and pressing her breasts into his back. Era. It seems like Foxy.kun is getting more interesting every day. The thing that shocked him the most, though, was that she gave his ear a little nibble. For his part, Naruto turned a deep red and hurried away from Akano. That was the first time a girl had ever done that to him. Why had it felt good, and why would she do that? Without a care in the world. Akano simply stood there biting her lip sensuously. This is not the time, Akano. Rias stated firmly. Akano simply laughed and said, sorry bucko, I just couldn't resist. After that, she resumed her usual behavior as if nothing had happened. She asked, startling him out of his reverie, and he produced a tri-pronged kunai. The markings on these allow me to teleport to wherever the kunai is. It was invented by my dad, so it's kind of a family secret, he replied. Your dad is involved with the supernatural too? He should have taught you stuff about the magical world. I'm surprised you haven't heard about devils till before now. She was looking at the kunai. With a distressed expression on his face, Naruto said, my parents died on the day I was born. I just managed to copy it with a little help from my old sensei. He was thinking of his father and his perverted sensei. With an apologetic expression on her face, Rias said, I'm sorry, I didn't know. It's nothing, I'm over it. If that's all, can I go now? He asked, forcing a smile. Rias nodded gravely. Without another word, he turned and walked away, leaving the group to speculate about what had transpired. Since Naruto appeared to be a chakra-using magician, Rias was genuinely curious about his past and would like to learn more. After a few days after that brief altercation with the fallen angel, everything went smoothly. Even though the jobs he and Issei did were relatively simple and less embarrassing, it seemed like Issei was always unable to come to an agreement. He also observed some strange things happening. For starters, it appeared that Rias was attempting to pry into his private life for some reason. They were his friends, but he wasn't ready to share his childhood experiences with them just yet. Additionally, he observed that Akano had been acting strangely around him. While she was always kind and innocent at school, she would engage in some intimate behavior in the clubroom. She would occasionally sit on his lap, touch him all over his body, and whisper inappropriate things, including references to whips and chains, into his ear. Something about him dominating her was even mentioned by her. Rias claimed that Akano was interested in S&M or whatever it was, and that it had something to do with the way he released his power when using senjutsu. He avoided her when she mentioned things like bondage because he was pretty much freaked out by them. However, he couldn't deny that a small part of him thought it was really hot. After all, who wouldn't if one of the sexiest girls at school did such things to you? He didn't think she could accomplish half of what she claimed she could with his level of power, despite the fact that she was a little strange. Issei seemed to react negatively to this, yelling things like, the pretty boys always get the girls, and similar things, but he was generally content with his new life. Kiba was more amiable and entertaining than the rest of his pals. Rias was a lot of fun to hang out with, and Kaneko was hilarious when she made fun of Issei in her monotone voice. However, he and Issei were currently on their way home after yet another unsuccessful attempt to reach an agreement. Naruto said to him in an overly cheerful tone, you really suck at this, you know. Shut up, it's not easy, you know. Maybe it would be easier if you actually helped instead of sitting there and laughing at me when I fail, he replied with criticism. Hey, I had to work hard to get where I was today. Doing stupid stuff like cleaning and dressing up isn't something I worked for. He was arguing for himself. Yeah, whatever, I'll get it the next time and then I'll be one step closer to being harem king, he said. Naruto assumed that the shock of nearly dying a second time had finally worn off and that he was once again his perverted self. Damn, and he was doing so well too. Sure man, I'm gonna hit the McDonald's around the corner, you want anything? Naruto replied. Issei said, Sure, let me get a hamburger. Naruto gave a nod and turned to leave. Issei took a position behind and began to move. He was reflecting on his recent poor performance. He was sure that Rias was furious with him for not answering another summons. Being Harem King was much more difficult than he had anticipated. He sighed. He was distracted by his thoughts when he bumped into the girl in front of him. "Kya!" she exclaimed as she fell to the ground. Issei looked startled and hurriedly extended his hand to the person, who was dressed in blue and had a cross around her neck. His mind screaming, "Danger!" at it caused a slight ache in his head. Additionally, the individual's face was obscured from view by a white veil draped around their head. Issei held out his hand to them and said, "I'm so sorry, here." A girl with long blonde hair that reached past her hips stood in front of him, and as he was pulled to his feet, he couldn't help but blush. In addition, she had stunning emerald green eyes that complemented her hair flawlessly. She truly appeared to be an angel, in his opinion. Her voice was as sweet as honey as she said, "I'm so sorry, I'm really clumsy and didn't see where I was going." He ogled her and said, "No, it was my fault. I was just preoccupied with something. This is a little embarrassing. I'm new in town and learning how to speak the language, so I don't really know where the church is. Could you show me, please?" she asked, appearing to notice his intense gaze. Issei said, "Yes, of course, I would be glad to," without even thinking about Naruto. He winced slightly at being blessed by God as she clapped and said, "Oh, thank you so much, may God bless you." "Well, my name is Issei Hyodo, and you?" he responded. "Asia Argento, nice to meet you." With a hamburger in hand, Naruto walked out of the store and returned to where he had left Issei. His eyes widened when he realized what it might mean, and he was shocked to discover Issei missing. Given how many times they attacked Issei in 2 days, it was possible that a fallen angel had gotten hold of him when he was left alone. Naruto fled in an attempt to locate his friend. In an attempt to continue the conversation, Issei asked, "So you're a nun, yeah?" Her voice was sweet and low as she said, "Yes, I am. I was recently assigned to the church here." He inquired, "Really, where did you go to before?" With a dejected expression, she said, "I used to work for a church in Europe. It was really great, a shame I had to leave." She was clearly depressed, and Issei felt bad for bringing it up. Why did he say things that made girls angry? When they heard a boy sobbing far away, he was going to try to console her in order to keep his chance. She abruptly stopped talking and ran over to the young boy who had a scrape on his knee. She got down on her knees and said, They're a big boy, like you shouldn't cry over such a little thing." As she began to heal the young boy's knee, Issei was shocked to see a green light emerge from her hands. She grinned and said, "They all better now run along." With a million-watt smile, he said, "Thank you very much, miss," and he and his mother left. As she watched the mother and child leave happily, she appeared content. "You must be surprised, huh?" she asked as she turned and walked back to Issei. "Hey, yeah, kind of, that's a pretty cool power. You're pretty lucky to have it," he replied. With a sorrowful smile, she looked at the ground and said, "Yes, very lucky. He made a mistake again, damn it." He felt a shiver run down his spine and looked up to see the church sitting there. With a hint of hope, she said, "Oh, thank you for accompanying here. I'm truly blessed to have met you. Maybe you could come visit me sometimes?" He said, half-heartedly, "Yeah, sure." He was a little uncomfortable with the church's atmosphere. She gave him a charming smile and nodded. She waved at him before turning around and walking away, saying, "Thank you one who again, Issei-san. Hopefully we'll meet again." "I think she was the nicest person I've ever met." From behind him, Naruto said, "I finally found you," he said, sounding irritated. "It's not nice to leave people hanging, you know." Naruto interrupted him, saying, "Hey, sorry, I just saw this really pretty girl and you know what, never mind." He sighed, wondering why he was always with girls. He grabbed his shoulder and vanished in a yellow flash, saying, "Well, we were going to take our time, but I'll just get us there faster. Rias is probably waiting." Clubroom. Rias tapped her fingers impatiently on the desk, asking, "What's taking them so long?" She blushed and said, Era, who knows, perhaps Foxy Kun is purchasing equipment based on my recommendation." Rias chose to observe the night sky instead of her best friend. Suddenly, there was a flash from the couch, showing Issei on the ground looking sick and Naruto lying down. With swirls in his eyes, Issei managed to croak out, "Where were you guys?" "IW. was helping a nun find the circuit church." "What?" she exclaimed, her face taking on an angry expression as her eyes widened. "Listen, Issei, I don't want you going near her or that church again. A devil being there could cause major problems. I don't want to see you with that nun either. If they found out you were a devil, they could kill you, understand?" She basically yelled at him. Her remarks surprised both Naruto and Issei. Spending time with a nun couldn't be all that horrible, could it? He was quite sad that he wouldn't be able to see her again, but he said, "Yes, I understand." He turned around and walked away, cringing a little at his failure. "Now Issei, unless you have a pact you can go home." Before leaving, Rias gave a small sigh and said, "It's been a long day so I'm going to go home a little early." What was up with the little outburst? Naruto whistled a little. "She doesn't mean to sound so mean, she's just worried is all," said Akeno. Naruto nodded. It was understandable that Rias was concerned because, in the previous few days, Rias had told him a lot about the world of devils and that churches were unquestionably forbidden. She also briefly discussed a faction that possessed chakra. Kaneko was shocked to learn that he possessed chakra. He had no idea that such a faction existed in this world. However, he was even more shocked when Rias revealed that there was a whole faction that possessed chakra as well, with its leader located in Kyoto. Perhaps he would go there soon to see what they could teach him. He was straying from the subject and would save that for later. In any case, he was aware of the danger churches posed to the devils, and Rias was correct to warn him against taking a chance. Since he had only known the girl for about 20 minutes, he was confident that Issei would move on. He heard Akeno say from behind him, Era, it seems we're alone, Foxy.kun. When he turned around, Akeno tackled him to the ground. With her hands on her face, she sat on his stomach and said in a slow, seductive voice, "You know, I like to be on top, but if you want I'll let you take control." All Naruto could do was stare at her with wide eyes and sputter gibberish. She batted her lashes quickly and said, "No, okay, that's fine, I like it that way." She removed her hands from her chin and ran her fingers through his black shirt, tracing his muscles. She leaned in and said, Era strong are we? I wonder how long you could last." Naruto was struggling to breathe. He hoped she wasn't discussing what he believed she was discussing. Yes, Naruto understood what sex was, even though he was a knucklehead. How could he not? He was versed in both male and female anatomy thanks to his sensei, a man who wrote porn for money, and his grandmother Suonde, a medic. He hadn't even kissed a girl yet, so even though Jiraiya was making fun of him, he wasn't prepared for everything she was doing despite all of their lessons and her advice on having amazing sex. She was just going to lean in to close the deal. He reappeared on top of the couch after vanishing in a yellow flash. Akeno was left perplexed as Naruto leapt off the couch and ran out the door. She sulked. She sighed and said, "Oh my, and I thought I had him too." Well, she would get him next. She always enjoyed a little chase, and it was a lot of fun. The following day, with the exception of Rias, the entire occult club was seated around the table sipping tea. Naruto was genuinely happy to have found these guys because they enjoyed such pleasant times together. Since Kaneko loved the way it felt and, let's just say, Akeno did too, he was currently letting a small amount of Sage Mode chakra seep out of him. Naruto knew that Kaneko was able to use both chakra and senjutsu. It seems that she was a unique kind of nekomata known as a nekosho, which was able to master senjutsu. He wasn't sure why Rias had only told him and not Issei, but he assumed it had something to do with the fact that he also possessed senjutsu and chakra. He did, in fact, attempt to teach it to her once, but she vehemently refused. Senjutsu was fantastic and greatly increased your power, but she denied him, saying something like, easier for humans or something similar. He was not sure why. With a determined expression on her face, Rias slammed the door open as they were enjoying their time together. She said authoritatively, "We've been assigned a mission from the Archduke." Kiba asked, "What is it, bucko?" "There is a stray devil in the area and we've been assigned to take care of it." Naruto was excited to learn that they were going on a hunt because it had been too long since his last real battle and he hoped that this one would be more difficult than his previous two battles with the fallen angels. "Naruto, if you want to come, we could use some extra help and we could demonstrate our powers too." As he got ready to leave, he said, "Sure, I'm looking for some fun anyway." She prepared a magic circle and said, "Alright, let's go then." A few seconds later, they all vanished. "What's a stray devil anyways?" asked Naruto as they gathered in front of the building. His response was, "Sometimes there are devils that leave or kill their masters to gain freedom, so usually they're dealt with by normal devils." She responded. Kaneko put on some gloves and said, "Don't worry perv, we got this." Rias nodded, "Yes, and apparently this one has been tricking people into that abandoned building and eating them." Issei choked and said, We have to kill something like that." Rias then walked over to the front of the building. As they entered, Naruto thought they might sneak in or something, but Rias simply kicked the door open. The room was dark and gloomy, and he felt a strange Y signature, but it was too small to be a human. It was most likely a rat or something. "What's this?" A voice from the darkness said, A human in here, oh I wonder how you must taste, hopefully you're sweet and delectable. Naruto knew exactly where the devil was and turned in time to see boobs. He couldn't tell what the rest of her looked like, but right now he was seeing a completely naked upper half of a woman. If it weren't for the person's ominous and evil aura, he would have blushed a little. Whoa, look at the jugs on that girl, Issei said. Go off. You have one last chance, return to your master and no harm will befall upon you, yelled Rias, stepping up a little. Please you little bitch, you're just jealous that I have a more sexier body than you. She responded, kneading her breasts. Damn, these strays were sure a piece of work. The girl looked like she had gone insane. Did this happen to all strays or was she crazy from the start? Then her entire body came into view, and Issei regretted saying those words earlier. Before she could continue, magic circles began to glow from her nipples, which was probably one of the strangest things Naruto had ever seen in his life and would undoubtedly stick with him for the rest of his life. They changed into miniature cannons and shot yellow beams at them, which they all easily avoided, with the exception of Issei, who needed Rias's help. Kiba go left. Rias began, but abruptly stopped when a blur passed her. It's been a while since I've let loose a little, yelled Naruto, who was in sage mode and racing blindingly toward the devil. Naruto punched the stray into a wall before anyone could blink. Damn you. The ground shook from the force of the impact as Naruto landed in front of her. She screamed before her upper body changed into that of a hideous monster as well. She got up from the ground and tried to punch him, but he simply flipped and landed on her enormous arm. Damn you, probably the most ugly thing I've seen, he said before flipping off her arm once more and giving her a head axe kick. Naruto, what are you doing? You could get killed, exclaimed Rias, who had finally recovered from her shock. Naruto simply smiled as he avoided another blow that destroyed a pillar. He smiled back, are you kidding me? This is fun. Akeno approached a stunned Rias and remarked, Era, it seems Naruto-kun is having a good time. Once more, Naruto sidestepped a blow by sliding and kicking her leg, causing the stray to topple over. When Naruto gave her a hard kick to her enormous body, cracking a few ribs, she grunted. The monster began to slowly rise again, but Naruto vanished from sight, kunai in hand. He reappeared and used wind chakra to cut off one of her arms. She let out a painful scream before deciding to leap onto her leg and drive the kunai into her stomach. Once, she let out a painful scream that filled the entire room. With blood streaming from its arm and guts oozing from its side, the demon behind him appeared to be dead as he landed in from it, facing the group. Damn, that's it. Well, that was a huge disappointment, Naruto said, facing the group, the body behind him. The group's eyes widened when they saw movement again. Guys, what's wrong? He asked. Then suddenly he was impaled by one of the demon's long toenails. Naruto. The entire group yelled, that's what that little piece of shit gets for fucking with me. The woman then flicked him off her foot, leaving the peerage stunned. They thought Naruto could handle this since he was so overpowered, but their negligence killed someone. What's up with the dejected expressions? Did anyone pass away? It was fun, but I'll end this now, Naruto said, grinning once more as he stood up, formed a Rasengan in one hand, and pulled out a Hiroshin kunai with the other. All you saw was a yellow flash before Naruto appeared and drove the orb into the girl's stomach, pushing off with his legs and landing in front of her. Blood was gushing from the hole Naruto made in her stomach, and her eyes were rapidly losing life. Well, that was fun. It's been a while since I let loose a little, he grinned as he turned to face the group. How the fuck did you do that anyway? Era, what a great job you did back there Foxy.kun. Akeno nodded, clearly wanting him more for that display of power. Well, mission accomplished, let's head back, Rias said, deciding she had enough excitement for today. They all gathered around her as she teleported them away. Issei, who was the most shocked of all of them, yelled, magic, he answered lamely. The following day normally, Naruto would go inside with Issei and watch him deal with the client, but this time he didn't even bother because he knew exactly what was going to happen and didn't think Issei was going to get packed anytime soon. Naruto would have helped Issei actually finish a job for once, but one learns best from experience. If Issei couldn't even do this alone, how could he take down a stray like the one they just fought? Naruto was honestly getting bored, and he was waiting on a bench while Issei was trying to make a contract. Sitting on a bench, Naruto was playing his favorite game, Clash of Clans, which he found to be quite enjoyable. Normally, he played it at home, which was very infrequently, but now that life was once again becoming dull, he might start playing it more. He had just finished destroying an enemy village, which would have earned him a perfect 3 stars, when he heard a gunshot coming from the apartment where Issei was at the time. He quickly put up his phone and ran to the apartment complex, where he sensed multiple signatures form. He opened the door slowly to see what was happening, and his face showed surprise when he saw Issei being carried by Kaneko and the rest of Ria's peerage there. He looked away from them and saw a man with dark red eyes and white hair, holding a girl by her blonde hair roughly, while the other was brandishing a gun. What shocked him the most, however, were two fallen angels immediately behind them, and the peerage and the other small group had red and white magic circles underneath them, and they were staring to disappear. Asia. Just as the fallen angels were about to flee, Naruto closed the gap so quickly that Might Guy would have been in awe. Grabbing one of them, he quickly twisted and slammed them into the wall while the others fled. Naruto recognized their face instantly. It was Calawarner, rising up and holding her stomach with a pained grimace. You once more. She straightened herself and said, why do you have to be so annoyance? Naruto scowled, thinking that whatever she and her other fallen angel friends did to that girl seemed to cause quite a reaction in Issei. He had never heard such desperation in Issei's voice before, and he would have tried to save her and remove the other fallen angel, but they were fading before he even entered the room, and he only had time to get one before they all vanished. What are you doing here? I thought I chased you off after last time. She laughed, nothing much, we just decided to set a trap for some devil scum. How about the girl? What were you doing with her? Getting into his fighting stance. Just because you're standing there trying to look all scary, I'm not going to start spilling my guts to you. She snarled. Raising her hand up in the air, she summoned a spear of light and throwing it at Naruto. This was too easy. Did these guys have anything besides this one attack? Oh well, he would see if training with the elements paid off. Earth style. Mud wall. He cried before slamming his hands into the floor. Instantly a wall made of hardened mud came bursting out of the ground, stopping the strike. You've always got some new trick, she yelled, racing towards him. Naruto jumped back as she smashed through wall. He landed and started doing hand signs, water style, scattering bullets. He yelled before spitting out dozens of huge balls of water at her. The attack hit her hard and sent her tumbling to the floor. She tried to move her wings, but the water seemingly made them unusable. What's wrong? Bird can't use its wings. He smirked before uttering. Lighting style. Electromagnetic murder. Suddenly a current of electricity came out of his hands, shocking the angel to a huge degree, only amplified by the remaining water from his previous attack. This will put a hole through you if you don't tell me what you fallen angels are still doing here. Issei is a devil now. Are you trying to start a war? He said, squatting down right in front of her as she collapsed to the ground, panting heavily after he let go of the technique. You see this? She barely opened one eye to see the spinning orb. Go to hell. She abruptly got her second wind and swung a light spear upwards. He said with a serious tone that he rarely used, which is kind of obvious why he hated war. Wood style. Wood dragon jutsu. He sobbed before a massive dragon emerged from the ground with glowing yellow eyes and darted towards the angel. He dodged to the right and kicked her upwards, just like Lee did when performing his front lotus. However, unlike Lee, he leapt back and went through hand signs at lightning speed. She screamed in agony as the enormous dragon crashed into her as she bounced off the roof and collided with the wall. Dead. She was crushed like a bug, and blood was streaming from her mangled body. Naruto cringed at the sight, but he honestly didn't think it would be that bad. Oh well, he had been through a lot more than this. Ignoring the scene, he took one last look before vanishing in a flash of yellow. The following day they assumed he would be okay because the angels were already teleporting when they left, but to their surprise, Naruto claimed he managed to grab one before they teleported away, which spoke volumes about Naruto's speed. The peerage was shocked to learn that Naruto had killed one of the fallen angels. They knew he was outside because Issei had told them where he was when they returned. As of right now, however, Issei had just returned from spending the day with Asia and was finishing up her explanation of what Asia had to go through. She was taken in by the church after her mother abandoned her, and she grew up learning to praise God and leading a very religious life. One day, it was discovered that she had the ability to heal people, and the church declared it a blessing from God. People from all over the world flocked to her to have their wounds healed. When the church discovered this, they immediately excommunicated her and called her horrible things like a witch, leaving her with nowhere to turn. He and Asia were both abandoned and exiled for powers that were viewed as evil, so it was a sad story that was somewhat similar to his own. If Rias decided at the end of this meeting that she wasn't going to save her, Naruto would definitely do so. Let me try to get this through your head. You can't save her. She's with the fallen angels, Rias said, slapping Issei across the face as he began to make his case. Just put her out of your mind because if we start a conflict, it might lead to another one. It doesn't matter what you say, I'm not just going to leave her there, he said, giving Issei some credit as he turned to face her with hardened eyes. I'll go no matter what, so if you don't want this war, you'll have to kill. In addition, you will simply be losing the worst member here, Issei remarked. Remember what I said about the pawn piece, Issei? You're not as bad as you think. Naruto raised an eyebrow, wondering what she meant when she said, if you enter enemy territory, say I don't know the church for example, you can be promoted to any piece except mine. Naruto made the connection and a look of realization appeared on his face as she said, also remember that no matter what piece you are it's always good to bring backup. In essence, she was approving their attack on the base. Me and Akano have something to attend to so don't go and do anything wild. Akano approached Rias and whispered something into her ear before she turned to leave, Akano following her. She laughed at Naruto's expression and said, don't blow up the place this time, okay? His statement was interrupted by Naruto, who said, save the speech, Superman, we're not going to stop you, in fact, we'll back you up. You guys might as well not try to stop me because it should be enjoyable. Naruto smiled, turned to face the other two, and waited for an answer. Yeah, I'll help you out, Issei-san. Kiba, brandishing his sword, said, I don't want Issei-senpai to die, even if he is a perv. Kaneko spoke without showing any emotion. Let's go kick some ass now, Naruto yelled, line break. You guys ready to do this? Kiba asked the group as they stood outside the building where Naruto had tracked the fallen angels. They all nodded and went inside, opening the door with a loud creak. The scene was familiar from their battle with the stray devil. Well, what do we have here? The same devils from before, oh, and an extra too. Fried looked at Naruto and said, that's great, now I have more devils to kill. He then pulled out his light sword and special gun. With the speed of a knight, Kiba rushed forward and slashed at him, but Fried was able to block him blow for blow, which was unexpected. You're not bad, pretty boy, he said, slashing diagonally at him. Kaneko picked up a large piece of rubble and threw it at him, kicking Kiba off of him before slicing the rock in half. Naruto decided it was time to step in and took a deep breath. Wind style. Air bullets. He screamed before releasing multiple compact bullets of air at the stray exorcist, and Fried attempted to block with the sword, but was easily thrown back onto the ground. Fried stood up and said, you could call me a magician or maybe a ninja. He smiled, drawing a puzzled look from everyone. Naruto charged at him with a kunai infused with wind chakra and slashed sideways with it. Fried was concentrating all of his energy on preventing this attack from getting past his defense, but the knife was much more powerful than it appeared. When it did, Fried staggered a little backwards, and Naruto slashed again in the opposite direction, but Fried just dodged. After exchanging blows for a while, Naruto seemed to grow weary of it and punched him in the arm with his left hand while blocking Fried's strike with the other. He then let out a little hiss of pain, dropped his light sword, and was stabbed in the leg by Naruto. He then flew back, rolled on the floor, and struck the podium. Fuck you devils and that fancy-ass mage too. Naruto then pulled out a flash bomb, threw it to the ground and vanished in a flash that momentarily blinded everyone. Naruto appeared pleased with his victory, but his head snapped to the rafters. Before Kaneko smashed some wood leading to a staircase, they heard Kiba say, well, it was good to see him again. They hurried down the stairs, only to be startled to see a weak Asia strapped to a cross and Rayarne glowing bright green. Asia! Issei shouted, then charged headlong into the gang of renegade exorcists, just as he was about to be sliced, when Naruto approached from behind and used a kunai to stab him in the neck. Watch out, Issei! Before joining Kaneko and Kiba in eliminating the exorcists, Naruto said, we'll clear a bath for you, get Asia, and let's dip. Issei swiftly ran through the center and freed Asia, while Rayarne stood there looking satisfied. With this, the fallen angels will adore me, she said, glancing at the new sacred gear on her hand. Why did you do this? There was nothing wrong with her. He yelled at her, this is what sacred gear possessors are for. She laughed in his face. Even though he wanted to fight her, he knew he wasn't strong enough and felt like a bitch for doing what he was about to do. He turned around with Asia in his arms and ran, turning around as he got close to the exit. Guys, let's go, Issei yelled, but they were currently fending off a large number of exorcists. Don't worry about us, we'll cover your exit. Naruto yelled back. But, he began, but he was stopped. Issei nodded, please trust us after all, you know what I can do, Issei. As he turned to go, Rayarne followed him up the stairs. Thinking that this was the ideal moment to put an end to the situation, Naruto quickly took out some Hiroshin kunai and scattered them among the crowd, saying, let's get wild. Before all you could see was yellow, he ripped through the group with speed and ruthlessness, slicing down anyone he saw when he appeared and then vanishing again. It was a bath of blood. The speed at which Naruto attended to Kaneko and Kiba left them perplexed. What? Kiba shook his head in response to Naruto's question, nothing. Let's hurry up and catch up to Issei. They all nodded and hurried up the stairs to assist Issei. As they came out, Kiba had to rush to Issei to keep him from toppling over. Good job, Issei, we knew you could do it, Kiba said encouragingly as she saw Rainier on the ground. When Rias said, yes, we did, she looked at her and said, good job you guys, now all there's left to do is to finish her. However, the girl who was in her place appeared to be normal. Issei, you wouldn't let them kill me, right? Issei's eyes widened and he stumbled a little when Rayarne said, Yuma. He gasped out, and she said in her innocent tone, Issei, I had to do this stuff, surely you could understand with me being a fallen angel and all. It seemed like Issei was struggling to process everything at the moment. He knew she was evil, but he couldn't bring himself to kill her or bend look at her. Issei, please, I want to be with you, I adore you. Ah. When a kunai was pierced through her side, she let out a sharp gasp of pain. Naruto's expression was gloomy. He could think that this girl knew she was doomed, so why would she use Issei's feelings in such a way? Before she passed away, it seemed as though she was merely adding salt to the wounds. Now that he understood what it was like for a girl to declare her love even though you knew it wasn't real, he felt terrible for Issei. He kept it a secret, but Sakura's false confession in the Land of Iron had deeply wounded him before he had truly come to terms with Hinata. Since she was attempting to shield him from Sasuke, he eventually forgave her, though that was likely the only time he ever felt angry with her. Naruto felt a little betrayed and hurt, despite the fact that it was for his protection. Even though Issei had only dated Sakura for a single day and he had loved her since they were young, this was still on a much smaller scale, but feelings like that shouldn't be played with. Naruto said, Rias, if you would please. After giving a nod, Rias approached the fallen angel and used her destructive power. As Rias destroyed her, Issei closed his eyes. 2 rings appeared in Issei's hand shortly after, floating down from the sky. He hurried over to Asia, who was lying on the bench, and replaced the sacred equipment on her after recalling what had happened when it was taken away. They waited, but nothing came of it. After that, Issei started crying on Asia's corpse as his eyes started to well up with tears. The rest of the peerage, including Naruto, watched with sympathy. Really, it was depressing. He assessed Issei's feelings and saw that he was currently in a desperate situation. It was awful that the one girl Issei truly valued enough to avoid being manipulated and risking his life for ended up dead. Today, Rias shocked them once more by bringing out a bishop. She held the chess piece in front of his face and said, Hey, there's no need to cry, look. Why you mean? He croaked. She put the bishop on her chest, recited, and nodded. Rias Grammary command thee Asia Argento to rise once again and serve me as my bishop, embrace your new life as a devil. The piece was dissolved into Asia's body as a magic circle materialized beneath her. She opened her eyes slowly as Issei checked to see if this was real. Issei-san, tell me what happened. He gave her a tight hug and remarked that it was fortunate she was still alive. As she sat there relishing the sensation, the unexpected touch caused her to flush. That was a joyful way to wrap up tonight's events, and Naruto had to smile. It appeared that Issei had a lovely girlfriend to keep him in check and prevent him from becoming so depraved. Unconsciously, he pondered whether there was anyone in the world who was like that for him. The black cat was staring at him from the shadows with a sly smile on its face, but he was too preoccupied to notice it. Things began to change following the incident with the fallen angels. First of all, Asia had nowhere to stay, so she chose to stay at Issei's house because she seemed safer and more protected there. Asia, the sweetest and most compassionate person Naruto had ever encountered, was a wonderful addition to the group. Naruto believed that Issei was attempting to exercise some self-control and treat her more like a younger sister because of the innocence that seemed to emanate from her. Since Asia was a healer, she was also a good addition to Ria's peerage. The team benefited greatly from having the sacred gear Twilight Healing, which allows you to heal your wounds while fighting. Additionally, they went out to collect familiars for Asia and Issei. You could call upon these familiars, which came in a variety of species, to help you. Since you could only attend once this time of month, the student council decided to challenge Ria's peerage to a sporting event in order to gain their own familiarity. Sona appeared to have acquired a new pawn as well, Saji, who attempted to attack Asia but was thwarted by Issei. He never expected to see this side of Issei, so it was good that she was being watched out for. Sona and Naruto had a nice chat about some school-related topics, but she seemed disappointed that he couldn't be reincarnated. In a tennis match, Rias, Akano, Sona, and Sona's queen squared off. Everyone attended the huge event. In fact, they were all so excited to see the great Oni-samas that they somehow missed them using magic to win. They had a team battle in dodgeball, which Rias won. After that ended in a draw because the court and tennis rackets were destroyed. Asia found a small blue dragon in the forest that shot out lighting for a familiar face thanks to a strange guy who rhymed like bee when he rapped. The slime that Issei had requested suddenly appeared and tore off the girl's clothing. Naruto froze in place when that occurred. Having never seen a girl's breasts before, he had to admit that he was quite fond of Akino's and Rias's. Naruto turned away without attempting to appear perverted after realizing he was staring. Issei sobbed like a baby when the girls and Kiba were able to destroy the slime because he couldn't have anything that would take off women's clothes, and he returned that evening without knowing anyone. Additionally, he received some news that truly took him by surprise. Issei had finally secured a deal, after Rias offered to grope Issei if he signed a contract, that is. Additionally, Rias had to accompany him to work, so. The fact that Issei was able to reach an agreement at last was all that mattered, and perhaps this would help him get going. In addition, Rias made the decision to begin Issei's training, and boy did Issei need it. It's likely that the man couldn't perform 10 pull-ups without becoming exhausted. As an aside, Rias has recently appeared to be quite preoccupied. When Naruto noticed that she was aimlessly staring into space, he would try to ask her what was wrong, but she would always wave him off and continue as if nothing had happened. He assessed her feelings and found that she was experiencing a mix of sadness, anger, and anxiety. Since the entire peerage was beginning to worry about her, Naruto hoped it would be settled quickly. However, he was currently learning how to play chess, and Akeno was the one instructing him. She had been hanging around him a lot for teasing opportunities, and occasionally they would actually sit down and have fun, so it wasn't all that shocking. Although she rarely displayed it, Naruto had already seen two sides of her. The genuine relief on her face when she realized that none of the peerage had been hurt in the battle against the fallen angels, and the playful, teasing side that he had deduced she frequently used on him. Now that he was nearer to them and no longer had to hide from them at school, he had the chance to assess them emotionally. Apart from Rias and Issei, it turned out that all of them harbored negative feelings and hatred for something. Surprisingly, for some reason, even Akeno harbored a deep hatred for her. He questioned what could have led to her constant cheerfulness and fun. She took his rook after saying, "No, Naruto.kun, the piece moves in a L shape like this." Naruto yelled, "Damn, Akeno. Chan, you're like awesome at this." She covered her mouth with her hand as she giggled. She said with a lovely smile, "I am pretty good bucko and I started to play chess since we were kids, but it also helps that you're really bad. So hurtful, Akeno. Chan." Naruto lowered his head in despair, and she just kept laughing at his antics. Kiba sipped his tea next to Kaneko, who was eating sweets, and said, "Don't worry about it, Naruto, you're new to the game, you'll get better eventually." He pointed to Akeno and raised his head, saying, "I guess you're right, and I won't stop until I beat you." With an assertive grin, she questioned, Era determined are we?" Issei stumbled into the room, panting heavily, with Asia and Rias following him, just as Naruto was about to respond. While Asia squatted down beside Issei to check for injuries, she informed them, "He's getting better, but he still has a ways to go before he can do any hard hitting." Then Rias moved past them all and took her seat in the front of the room. Then she turned and took another look out the window. In order to finally get some answers, Naruto was going to confront her because he had had enough of this. But before he could, a woman with long silver hair tied in two ponytails with blue ribbons emerged from a magic circle. She appeared to be in her 20s, had on red lipstick, and was dressed like a maid. She looked stunning, Naruto had to admit. She said gravely, "My lady, I've come to talk about some important business." Without even looking at her, Rias answered, "We have nothing to discuss, it won't happen." All right, what was happening here? Why was this woman speaking to Rias like a king, and who was she? "My lady, sure." She began, but another magic circle entered the room and interrupted her. Unlike the one he had previously seen, this one was orange and featured distinct patterns. A man with blonde hair that was only spiked up in the center emerged in a huge flash of fire. His eyes were blue, and beneath them were heavy bags. He was dressed in a white shirt with a button undone to reveal part of his chest and a dark red blazer. With a cocky smile, he said, "My dear Rias, I've come to visit you." Naruto questioned, "Who is he?" Though she knew who this was, Graphia turned to face him and arched an eyebrow. Rias had recently informed her brother that a powerful mage with blue eyes and silver hair had sided with her peers. As his wife and queen, Graphia was naturally informed as well. Assuming this was him, she responded to his inquiry by saying, "This is Lord Phoenix. Sama third in line to the House of Phoenix, he is also Rias. Sama's fiancé." As everyone watched in disbelief, Kiba's hand dropped from the teacup and smashed to the ground. with a trembling chess piece in her hand. Akeno stared at them. After recovering, Issei collapsed to the ground once more in disbelief. Asia's eyes widened at the realization, and her hands were placed to her mouth. Later, while sipping tea on the couch, Riser moved his hand up her leg and said, "Riser is hurt you didn't tell them about me, Rias. We are getting married after all." Along with the rest of the peerage, Naruto became enraged. Who did he think he was feeling her up like that in such a place? Rias abruptly got up and said, turning away from him, "I'm not marrying you, Riser. Why do you to be such a pain and keep pursuing me? It would be better if we just break this off." Rias refused to back down, saying, "You know we can't do that, making sure that devils stay pure. Blooded is top priority now that our numbers have weakened drastically. I don't care if pure bloods are dying out, I will marry who I chose." End of discussion. Riser. She turned to face boldly once more. With a fire in his eyes, he said, "Riser doesn't think that is possibly, my dear Rias. Riser will have his bride even if he has to burn everyone here." She felt a hand suddenly cup her chin. With the exception of Naruto, who sat on the couch and stared at this pitiful man, the entire peerage assumed combat stances. In any case, who could take seriously a man who speaks of himself in the third person? If Naruto remembered correctly, the Phoenix family was one of the final 72 pillars remaining after the wars, which is why he detested people like him. This indicated that the man was wealthy, conceited, and lavishly pampered. From behind them, Grafia said, "As the moderator for this meeting I can't let you do that, Riser." Sama. With a sheepish look on his face, Riser immediately backed up and said, "Even I, the great Riser, would not be brave enough to take on the ultimate queen of Lucifer. Sama's himself, my future brother. Law wouldn't be happy with my actions if I were to attack." As Asia and Issei gaped in amazement, Naruto said, Wait, did you just say that Rias has a brother and he's the strongest Satan in the underworld?" Riser turned to Grafia and asked, "Oh, and who might you be?" He didn't think Naruto was important enough to ask directly, so he asked her, "What is a lowly human doing here?" "He is a magician and a friend of mine. Just like everyone else in my peerage he can be here," Rias said. "My master expected that his would happen and that if Rias Sama refused to marry Riser, Sama that they would settle it by doing a rating game," Grafia said, and Riser nodded indifferently. If he understood Rias correctly, the rating game was something that noble devils did with their peerage members. He snapped his fingers and said, "Well, I must ask you, Rias, is this all your peerage has to offer?" The same Phoenix magic circle materialized out of nowhere, and 15 girls, all of whom were adorable or stunning in their own unique ways, came out. Issei began to yell about Riser's good fortune and what he would do for a harem. He smirked and said, "Oh, so you want a harem? Damn it, Issei, just once take it seriously." "Yebeluna," was his response. She answered, "Yes, Lord Riser." Everyone was shocked when a girl with wavy dark purple hair approached him and began making out passionately. Riser began kneading her breasts after he was done, and he remarked sarcastically, "You'll never have what I do." Naruto had reached his limit. This man was actually going to show up and force Rias to wed him. Keeping a bloodline pure should not be the reason for marriage. Rather, it should be about love and passion. Then, in front of his future wife, he dared to claim to have a harem and begin making out with one of them. Even worse, the girls seemed to enjoy it. Why were these people doing this? "Listen, I don't care if you're a Phoenix or not doing all the shit you are now. It's disrespectful in front of any wife, and you don't deserve anyone after what you've shown us," Naruto stated, standing up. "Yeah, I agree with Naruto, and if you even consider getting married to Bucko, I'll beat you to a pulp," Issei exclaimed, turning on his sacred gear. "You dare insult me? I'm the great Riser and you'll pay for what you said," yelled Riser, setting his hands on fire and running towards Issei. Riser appeared enraged as he released his servant. But before anyone could blink, Naruto materialized in front of Riser and used one hand to deliver his punch. "Unhand me, you worthless human," he shouted. He boldly said, "Make me." "Enough, Riser. Sama, if you have another outburst like that I'll tell Sirzex." "Sama." Grafia replied. Before retreating, they both glared while staring into each other's eyes. He said, "My dear Rias, as my wedding gift to you, I'll let your peerage train for 2 weeks before the games begin. Goodbye." He then teleported away with his peerage members. The situation has become much more intricate. The following day, Naruto was in his final class of the day, not even focusing on the lesson. He was furious and irritated at the moment because, after that foolish Riser prick ruined everything, Rias wouldn't even allow him to train her peerage. Rias responded that she had to be the one to do it when he asked why. Naruto didn't realize that her parents had purposefully set this up because they knew that Riser would always win a rating game against Rias without fail. They considered her unfit to choose a husband for herself because they didn't believe she was intelligent or strong enough to outgun Riser. Yes, it was self-serving, but she would show her parents that she could succeed on her own. It might have been a code violation in addition to that. Naruto was not permitted to attend since he was not officially a member of her peerage. In this game, your strength was supposed to be your own, and Naruto was an unidentified variable and an outside source that would be deemed cheating if they received assistance from him. If Riser found out, he could declare the march to begin before they were prepared. Thus, he found himself stranded in French, gazing into space while his mind pondered what to do. Ring. Before he hurried out of the room, Naruto heard the teacher say, "Okay class, remember to practice future tense conjugations." In addition, he had nothing to do and was extremely bored because there were no awesome missions to complete without the peerage. He was determined to watch more of his favorite show, The Walking Dead, as he made his way back to his apartment. He would never have appreciated any of this stuff in Konoha. There was so much wonderful stuff in this world. Naruto sighed and halted as he took a shortcut through the forest, calling out, "Whoever you are, come out, I know you're there." Lying on a tree, a girl with long, dark black hair, slitted yellow eyes, black cat ears, and a tail appeared. She had some strange-looking balls tied to the end of her revealing black kimono, and a yellow cloth was tied around her waist. Naruto was drawn to her attractive figure. Was every woman on the planet incredibly attractive? "You managed to spot me. Well, it's not a surprise considering who you are. Whiskers.kun nya. First Foxy.kun, then Whiskers.kun. Why is everyone always so preoccupied with his whiskers?" He questioned. "Who am I exactly?" Naruto tilted his head and turned to face her. "According to your school record, you're just a normal student named Uzumaki Naruto, but I know that's not what you really are. Nya. Because of the chakra and nature energy she exuded, she appeared to be a Nekosho." That verbal tick was cute, but he simply shrugged when she asked, "So you know that I can use senjutsu?" She nodded. "What I'm wondering is how can a human utilize chakra and senjutsu? Nya, he said, not really seeing this girl as a threat. "I was just born this way." She gave Naruto a somewhat curious glance. She began to smile mischievously, but to be honest, she had no idea how much more power he was concealing. "Your power is amazing for that of a human, and you have senjutsu too. I also sense you're hiding back a lot of power," she started to say. "You see, I'm with the fallen angels and—" But Naruto interrupted her, moving so swiftly behind her that she would have sworn he hadn't been there at all. He removed his joyful demeanor and put a kunai to her neck. "What do the fallen angels?" She didn't appear surprised. In fact, she appeared pleased by his speed. "Oh come on Whiskers.kun, you don't think I am with those stupid fallen angels that disobeyed orders and caused problems for your friends?" "Nya," she replied. For a brief moment, Naruto appeared to consider the possibility that not all fallen angels were evil and that small group was acting on its own. Nor did he detect any dishonesty in her voice. He asked after carefully removing the kunai from her neck. Putting his kunai back up, he said, "All right, what do you want though?" She trailed her hands down her body and spoke slowly. "Simple, I just want to play Nya." Sitting on the branch with his back to the tree, Naruto said, blushing and averting his gaze from the implications, You went to the wrong guy. The first don't even know your name." With a playful expression on her face, she said, "My name is Kuroka, and why can't you play with me?" "I just wanted to spar Nya," he asked suspiciously. "OS. Spar? Yay, I can spar. But why would you come out here just to spar with me?" She leaned in closer to him and said, "Let's just say I'm very interested in you Naruto.kun, very interested Nya." Her tone made Naruto shudder, and he retreated. What made this girl appear? Already, Akeno was making fun of him, and now she was doing the same. He said clumsily, "Sure, we can spar if you want to." He glanced to the side as she grinned and said, "As a bonus, I'll take you to the Fallen Angel headquarters for dinner Nya." On the one hand, it would be interesting to see what the Fallen Angels were up to. However, this might be a trap for him. You can never be too careful, but his intuition told him that this girl wasn't lying and that she wanted to do all those things. Naruto agreed because he would simply use his abilities to get out of it even if she was lying. "Okay, let's go." This fight was going to be his hardest yet, and it would be entertaining to take on a girl with senjutsu skills. He shouted, "All right, let's roll Kuroka." Naruto had to lean back to avoid a kick that was directed at his face as she gave him a playful smile before vanishing from view. He deflected a blow to his chest by leaping off the branch and landing on the ground. This girl was extremely strong and quick, despite her delicate appearance. In fact, Naruto had to work hard to block her blows. Now that he had the sage's body, he could activate sage mode almost as quickly as Hashirama, so he quickly backed up for a brief moment. Leaning slightly to the right, she avoided slapping at him with her hand. Naruto made the decision to kick her in the side. Even though Naruto wasn't at all strong, he still used a lot of force in that kick, which she was able to block. She threw him against a tree after grabbing him by the leg. Using chakra, he was able to correct himself and adhere to the tree. Interesting, I've never seen anyone use chakra like that NYA, she replied. She ducked and attempted to hit him in the air, where he was immobile, but he vanished and kicked her on her back as he pushed off the tree and kicked her in the face. Despite grunting from the force of the kick, she managed to hold her ground. Her hand began to glow, and she said, "Let's kick this up a knock." She charged at him, moving more quickly than before, and attempted to poke him in the chest. He leapt to his feet, barely escaping the blow, and hurled 3 kunai in her direction. She used her hand to bat them all away. She leapt to meet him in midair and attempted to stab him once more. He gave her a hard axe kick to the head while grinning and flipping his body in midair. She made a sound and then crashed into the ground, scattering dirt all over the place. Naruto thought he had gone a bit too far and fell to the ground. He was shocked to see her running toward him and unharmed when the dust settled. She created a critical gap, which Naruto exploited by avoiding her blow and slamming his own punch into her face. You can only imagine how shocked he was when his hand went straight through. An illusion widened his eyes. It cost him a little because he was never good at genjutsu. When he pivoted, he skidded back a little when he felt a hand press against his chest, but other than that, everything was fine. "What? You should be on the floor right now, that should have severed your ki flow," she screamed. "Ki flow?" inquired Naruto. She flipped over onto a tree limb. She was genuinely surprised when she said, "Ki is the thing that is inside every species on this world, but now that I'm searching for it in you I can't find anything." He was fully alive and breathing, even though he shouldn't be able to survive without ki. Naruto realized that this ki was comparable to his world's chakra system. He was kept alive by chakra inside of him rather than ki flow. She attempted to jab him and sever his ki flow using a technique akin to the gentle fist, which attacked the chakra system and halted chakra flow. This didn't work on him because he had chakra to replace ki. She shouted, tapping some purple symbols into the air, "No matter, let's see how you do about this." A dense purple gas suddenly appeared and fell on Naruto. He sensed Kurama's efforts to eliminate the poison. In his mind, Kurama said, "This is some really strong stuff, but I should be able to get rid of it." She raised her hand and said, "You're immune to my poison too, you're just too interesting, Naruto-kun." He was suddenly forced to one knee and felt a heavy burden. He gritted his teeth under the pressure and said, "What the hell?" She smiled at him and giggled. "They say true senjutsu masters can control time and space. I can't control time yet, but as you can see I have mastered space." "What is gravity?" He seemed to have dozens of houses on him, or something. Fortunately, Naruto had benefited from his training with the Rinnegan. Naruto had the body in addition to the sage's eyes, unlike Pain. He was able to use gravity control for a lot longer and without any delay, unlike Pain. He was still in the process of figuring out how to use his gravity-based abilities to fly, but he was not quite done yet. As an aside, he still had some abilities to develop, such as the ability to resurrect the dead. Naruto would also survive the backlash if he had the sage's body. In any case, he was immortal even if he didn't. For a minute, he used his eyes to fight the pull of gravity. Kuroka gave him a startled look as he got up off the ground, saying, "Oh my Lucifer, that is really incredible, Naruto-kun nya." She was impressed that a human could do what she did. As the pressure released him, he deactivated his eyes and said, "Thanks, but let's get this over with." He glanced up and ran so quickly that she was unable to see him. She was severely struck in the stomach before colliding with multiple trees. She got up unsteadily, clearly exhausted from the kick. Before she could blink, she was struck in the side and threw up against a tree. She was lying there, her vision becoming fuzzy, and all she could see before everything turned black was Naruto. She was lethal, and Naruto seemed impressed as he looked down at her. She was the most formidable opponent he had yet encountered. Before he sat down to meditate, he knelt down and picked her up bridal style, placing her on one of the splintered logs. Kuroka awoke drowsily, rubbing her head as she sat up. She sat up and took in her surroundings as all of her memories of Naruto flashed through her mind. She noticed that he was staring at her with a broad smile on his face. After a moment of surprise, she flashed a cunning smile. With a hint of arrogance, he asked, "So, do I get my prize?" She simply smiled at him and hugged him. At last, she had found a strong enough partner for marriage. "Yes, you do, and a little extra if you want nya." Naruto froze at the tone. He would blush no matter how many times he was teased. Then she pushed him off the log by bending closer to him. He stood up and yelled, "What the hell was that for?" She walked over to him, giggling. She took hold of his collar. When her tongue emerged and brushed over his whisker lines, he shuddered. She asked naively, "Forgive me, NYA, why?" "Yeah, can we just go get dinner?" he said shakily, stepping back from her. With the same seductive tone, she grinned at him and said, "Yes, let's go and I'll personally give you dessert, NYA. They vanished as a magic circle appeared from beneath them. Grigori headquarters. Naruto glanced around the room as it came into view. It had the appearance of an old castle, complete with fallen angels chatting, laughing, sipping beer, and other such activities. This place was much livelier than he had anticipated. A man with short, light hair and some kind of armor said, "Yo, what's up, Kuroka? Hey, who's the new guy? He's someone really important. Baku, would you be nice enough to tell Azazel that we have a guest for dinner tonight, NYA?" she said as she looked at Naruto. Baku obeyed despite being utterly perplexed as he peered between them. Naruto looked around and remarked, "This place looks pretty cool. See, I told you not all fallen angels are bad, NYA. He nodded. Although the people in this place appeared content, they were a little boisterous. Arrow. Senin took him to a bar that looked like that. Baku approached them from behind and said, You can bring your friend with us to eat Kuroka." She walked ahead of them, swaying her hips slightly, and said, "Excellent, let's go then, NYA. Baku and Naruto pursued her, asking in a low voice so as not to attract Kuroka's attention, "So how did you meet Kuroka anyway?" "Huh, well, the crazy thing is that she said I caught her attention and then we spared. She said if I won she would treat me dinner, so here I am." He replied with a shrug. "Why, you mean you beat Kuroka and she was the one who asked you?" Baku asked, looking horrified. On the one hand, he was impressed because he didn't sense anything supernatural from this man, indicating that he was human, and defeated Kuroka, who was stronger than him. However, the poor sap had no idea what he was getting himself into. Kuroka turned to them and said, "We're here, ready to eat? NYA. He was about to tell him to get the fuck out of here. "Yay, I'm starving," Naruto cried, clutching his stomach. After chuckling, Kuroka unlocked the door. A man with blonde and black hair and a goatee was seated in the front of the room. He was dressed in black pants and a red coat. A man with silver hair and blue eyes, similar to Naruto's, was standing next to him. He was dressed in black pants, a green shirt, and a black jacket. "Baku told me we would have a guest today, so let me introduce myself. I'm Azazel, one of the leaders of Grigori and the Fallen Angels. This guy right next to me is Valley, and you are?" replied Azazel with an open invitation. "Uzumaki Naruto, an magician," Naruto clarified. "Please take a seat, dinner will be served shortly," Azazel replied. Naruto had specifically requested some ramen, and boy did they deliver. Dinner was served shortly after, and he thought it was delicious. He spoke to a few of the table's occupants. Baku was humorous and easily agitated, just like him. Azazel appeared relaxed and easygoing, and Valley was rather aloof, uninterested in the conversation, and spoke very little. Naruto was itching to ask Azazel some questions that had been on his mind ever since he arrived as they finished their meal. "Yo, Azazel, I was just wondering what you know about Issei Hyodo, because I found some of your fallen angels trying to kill him," he replied. Why he would talk so casually about that baffled many. "Issei Hyodo? I sent Rei to observe him because I suspected that he might have a sacred gear that would be dangerous. It looks like Rei disobeyed my orders and tried to kill him. I take it you dealt with her?" he replied. Naruto nodded, aware that he was being honest. Everyone was shocked, with the exception of Azazel. "Yeah, she's dead, and I have some news that you might want to hear. One of you members, Kokebil, betrayed you. He was the one who ordered Rei to kill Issei." He exhaled. "I'm aware of it. He defected a couple of weeks ago. I tried to keep it under wraps so it wouldn't cause an outburst," said he. Naruto nodded. There are definitely a lot of traitors in the faction. He interlaced his fingers and said, "But I'll deal with that. Tell me how you and Kuroka met each other." Everyone was taken aback by what this meant once more. "Well, I was walking home after school and she said she wanted to spar with me for some reason. So we spared and I ended up winning. I knocked her out and beat her in the end." Valley appeared somewhat taken aback by the news, but Azazel watched with a smile and a sparkle in his eyes. If he defeated Kuroka, perhaps Naruto was another formidable foe worth fighting, and he would finally stop being asked to marry Kuroka for good. Baku couldn't help but choke on his water even though he had already heard this information. "Ah, I see, so Kuroka found another candidate for marriage?" Azazel asked. chuckling to himself at Naruto's expressionless expression. Marriage, what the hell are you talking about? Azazel continued to smile, trying not to laugh. Kuroka here admires strength, and she considers herself strong. She is looking for someone as strong or stronger than her to marry her. For several minutes, Naruto sat motionless, his mouth hanging open. When cold water hit his face, he was startled out of his daze. What the hell, I can't get married, he exclaimed, shaking his head from side to side. Kuroka looked up at Naruto with a cute pout and said, "Why am I not good enough for you, Nya?" with a hint of fake anger in her voice. No, that's not it at all, it's just, I want to get married to someone I love, not someone I just met. Naruto replied. She whispered, "Oh, you'll get plenty of time to get to know me, Naruto-kun Nya." She would do things like that, and Naruto couldn't stop blushing. In an attempt to defuse the situation, he coughed and said, "Isn't there any way we could take the spar session thing back?" Valley laughed. "Good luck with that. I repeatedly rejected her and she never quit trying to pursue me. I just beat her in a spar just like you did and she never stopped until now." Naruto went over his choices. It was crazy that he couldn't get married at the age of 17. A small part of him encouraged him to follow through because he could get a hot and attractive wife, but his rational side put an end to the notion. Oh no, what was his option? He was cornered because she wouldn't stop pursuing him until he got married, even though he couldn't. His response was, before he abruptly left the room. After him, Kuroka remarked, "He thinks he can run away, that's cute Nya." Azazel simply sat in his chair, clearly amused by what he was seeing. Then he sighed, knowing that Naruto was clearly strong and that Kuroka had a task to complete. Hearing that Naruto had defeated Kuroka had impressed him, but now that he was in front of him, he could see that Naruto was a powerful entity. He had been so good at hiding his power level that it had taken him some time to discover it. Even so, he was unable to ascertain Naruto's exact level of power. Fortunately, Naruto was a good child. He could see a lot of suffering as well as warmth and compassion in Naruto's eyes. Azazel knew Naruto was devoted to his friends, so he didn't worry too much. After 10 minutes as Kuroka lay across Naruto's lap, he awkwardly looked around, trying not to notice what she was doing to his lower body. Despite Azazel's desire to keep the meeting private, Kuroka wouldn't let Naruto go, so he reluctantly brought him into the room. Azazel said gravely, "I've called you here to discuss a matter that has recently popped up." His voice startled Naruto a little because he sounded like such a laid-back guy. "Some fallen angels have decided to betray me. My sources tell me they're working for Kokebeel. It just so happens there's a lot of them and some exorcists they have taken with them have some important sacred gears." He began. "These sacred gears are probably a higher class sacred gear and are very powerful. I want Kuroka to retrieve them and take out the traitors. They're located in Paris, France. Now be very careful, Kuroka. I don't want this sacred gear destroyed. It will aid me in my research to make an artificial one." Azazel stated, "I thought sacred gears were things you're born with? How are you going to make one?" asked Naruto, who appeared excited and had a strong desire to go. "Valley is one of the sacred gear users I know, and his is too powerful to try and copy or tinker with. I was hoping if Kuroka got these then the power level would be low enough to copy or simpler to understand. So it is imperative she get these gears so I can make some progress." He continued. When Naruto first saw Valley, he felt somewhat like Issei, perhaps he had a Longinus. Then, Naruto nodded, saying it sounded good. It was evident to him that Azazel was attempting to obtain his sacred equipment from criminals rather than innocent people. If he were feeling giving, he might be able to purchase an artificial piece of sacred equipment from Azazel. "Can I go with her?" Naruto then inquired. He might as well go meet his new friends since he would be by himself for the next 2 weeks anyhow. Azazel asked, "Why do you want to go?" He wouldn't want to reject a person who is essentially Office or possibly higher, but it's not like he would say no. "I'm going to be alone for some time and I want something to do, plus just think of it as a helping hand," smiled Naruto. Kuroka interrupted, tucking herself into his chest, "Or maybe he can't wait to spend time with me alone Nya." Naruto tried to focus on Azazel while blushing at what she was doing. Azazel remarked, "Of course you can go, Naruto, thanks for the help, I'll owe you one." She was curious about Kuroka's plans for the unfortunate man while traveling. As Naruto and Kuroka left the room, Azazel said, "Valley and Baku, I have some other stuff you guys need to attend to." Azazel was at a loss for what to think. Naruto couldn't simply continue to go unnoticed. He wasn't sure whether to tell everyone or keep it a secret because he didn't know what might happen if people found out about another being like Office or Great Red. Azazel was leaning more toward the secret option because he didn't appear to be a threat and, to be honest, he kind of liked him. Kuroka said, "You ready to go?" NYA, yay, let's roll. As Kuroka began to set up a magic circle, Naruto inquired, so Paris, how is it? Paris is one of the most beautiful cities in the world. I honestly think that Paris is the best city in the world. Epically at night, NYA, she replied with a slight grin. Naruto reviewed his knowledge of this world. France was located in Europe, one of the world's 7 continents. He had discovered that Paris had a magnificent monument known as the Eiffel Tower and was, in fact, one of the world's most beautiful cities. However, Kuroka's glowing description of it made him question just how wonderful this place was. She smirked as she winked at him and said, "You know they also call it the City of Love, NYA." Naruto blushed slightly, still finding it hard to believe everything that had transpired at the dinner table. He covered his embarrassment with a smile and said, "They do? That's cool. I want to see it, so let's get going." Kuroka smiled back at him and said, "All right then, let's go, NYA." In response, she triggered the magic circle. In an instant, they vanished. Outside of Paris, a forest, they blinked and took in their surroundings. Since they were in a forest, Naruto reasoned that it wouldn't be a good idea to just show up in the middle of a street with so many people. Naruto looked around and asked, "How far away are we?" She answered, "About a mile or 2, NYA, before shouting, "I'll race you." And running away faster than a bullet, he smiled, before yelling, "Wait up, NYA," and chasing after him. Kuroka stood there blinking quickly at the cloud of dust. Naruto was running from tree to tree at lightning speed, and you could hear his laughter a mile away. At last, he emerged from the small forest and stepped out onto a small cliff. As he looked at the city known as Paris, his laughter stopped. As he gazed at the stunning city, his face was full of amazement and awe. The sun was shining on the land at around 3, and although the architecture was a little older, it still had a lovely appearance. The designs appeared intricate and well crafted. They had a wider range of colors and were considerably smaller. Some areas of the city had rivers with lovely, clean, and clear water. The sun's reflection on them only enhanced their beauty. There was a lot of greenery in the city as well, and the trees looked fantastic, standing tall and sturdy. Probably the biggest thing he had ever seen was in the center. The Eiffel Tower, which had legs at first, eventually only had one section that protruded into the sky. It was enormous, even larger than Japan's skyscrapers. He simply stood there taking in the cityscape for a few moments. Kuroka burst through the forest's edge, panting. "You could have given me some time to get ready, NYA, she exclaimed, gasping for air. She sighed and waved it off, saying, "No big deal, let's find these guys. Then hopefully we can spend some time in the city, NYA. Naruto shook his head and rubbed the back of his head as he looked at her. "Sorry, I get carried away sometimes." The hotel. When Naruto and Kuroka got to one of Paris's many hotels, Kuroka was able to secure them a 4-star establishment for tourists. The young Japanese woman in charge of the counter said, "I'm so sorry, but all we have left is one of the couple suites on the 3rd floor." Naruto looked around anxiously as Kuroka answered, "It's fine, I was going to ask for one anyway, NYA." She handed the keys to Kuroka and smiled broadly as she said, "Ah well then, that's perfect, here are your room keys. Your number is 314. She walked up the stairs with Naruto right behind her and said, "Thank you, let's go, Naruto-kun, NYA." When they entered the room, they were quite impressed. There was only one bed, a small refrigerator, a clean bathroom, and a flat-screen TV. "I suppose that's why the suite was intended for a couple." She gave him a playful smile and said, "Looks like we're sleeping together, NYA." The double meaning made him flush, and he responded, rubbing the back of his neck awkwardly, "No, it's okay. I'll just sleep on the floor or something." She smirked at him and pretended to pout, saying, "How disappointing. I really don't mind. The ground sounds really uncomfortable, NYA." In reality, she meant that it wasn't a huge deal to her or anything, but Naruto seemed to think it was polite. He lay down on the couch and said, "No, it's okay. I've slept in worse places than the couch." She took the opulent bed for herself and shrugged, saying, "All right, but I gave you a chance, NYA. Hey, at least he was kind enough to give it to her alone." The following morning, when Kuroka smelled something pleasant, her nose twitched. She stood up and made a cute airborne hand gesture. She used her hands to rub her eyes, much like a cat would. She rose and made her way to the door leading to the tiny kitchen. She was a little exhausted when she asked, "What are you doing?" "NYA, Naruto said, "Well, I'm just making breakfast. You want some? It just finished cooking." He then placed some eggs on a plate. During their training trip, Jiraiya made him eat something besides ramen. In order to prepare some decent meals, he had to learn how to cook more healthful foods. She gave him a somewhat perplexed look before grinning, which was really thoughtful of him. She sat down and said in a seductive tone, "Thank you, I'll make sure to pay you back later NYA." Naruto attempted to roll his eyes in frustration and blushed. She was unable to have a single normal conversation. Since he wasn't the world's greatest chef, he placed the plate in front of her and hoped she would enjoy it. She grabbed a piece of bacon and bit into it. Although it wasn't the best food ever, it was still quite good, and her eyes slightly widened. "It's pretty good Naruto-kun, I might have you cook from now on NYA, she replied. She was lucky to find a partner who could prepare meals. What woman wouldn't enjoy occasionally having breakfast in bed? Relieved that the food wasn't total garbage, he made the decision to discuss the mission with her. Before he put some hash browns in his mouth, he asked, "When should we start looking for the fallen angels?" "Let's go look around for them at noon. They'll probably be on the move since it's the most busiest part of the day in order to blend in NYA, Kuroka replied. After giving a nod, Naruto chose to savor his breakfast. Coffee Paris was lovely, and Naruto really enjoyed it. The houses shone brilliantly in the sunlight, the streets were teeming with activity, and even the sidewalks and roads, which were lined like brick pathways, looked fantastic. Even though the people here were speaking in an odd way, he had a small issue. He was unfamiliar with the sounds that people were making to one another. These individuals appeared to be speaking a completely different language. Kuroka, who had just spoken to a waiter and placed an order for tea, surprised him by being able to understand everything they were saying. "How did you do that?" he exclaimed, his confusion growing. She responded with a giggle, "It's part of my abilities, I can understand any language NYA. I can't believe I forgot about this, but what about your tail and ears, shouldn't you hide them?" Naruto asked, his eyes widening as he looked at her from head to toe. "Don't worry, all it takes is a little illusion and they can't see a thing. Though it's not high level, so I guess you can see them NYA, she replied. After giving a nod, he made the decision to start working. He put down his tea and turned to face her. "So do we know where these sacred gear users are at?" She sighed. "Unfortunately no, and this city is huge. I tried searching for them using senjutsu, but my range can't cover a huge distance NYA, he nodded and said, "Let me give it a try." She looked at him as the area around his eyes turned organish-red. She sensed his strength as he looked around, knowing that he was likely the only person with superior senjutsu skills and could locate them. When his eyes opened, he saw numerous other energy signatures and said, "Found some fallen angels, they're about 3 miles west." The auras of fallen angels and devils were somewhat similar, but these felt pleasant, reassuring, and pure. Naruto choked on his tea and asked, somewhat surprised, "Date, you want to go on a date?" She grinned and put down some cash. "Let's get going. I'm looking forward to a date after all this NYA. She pouted and laughed inwardly at his face as he began to perspire. "Of course I do. We're in the most amazing city in the world and you wouldn't take me out to eat NYA, she said. Kuroka saved him from more humiliation by interrupting him as he began to spew gibberish, saying, "We can talk about that later, let's go confront these fallen angels NYA. Paris's streets. They quickly located the fallen angels after employing Naruto's incredible senses. They were currently pursuing 2 men. One with smooth blonde hair and brown eyes, and the other with black spiky hair and green eyes. The first was dressed in black pants, a white shirt, and a black jacket. The other was a blue coat with back pants and a yellow shirt. They were strolling and chatting about various topics. In order to face them, Naruto and Kuroka had to get them into a remote location. Naruto, who was walking next to Kuroka, inquired, "How do we get them off the street?" With a sly smile, she said, "Leave it to me NYA. She accelerated her pace and caught up to them. They both stumbled forward as she abruptly bumped into them. She gave them her most innocent smile and said, "I'm so sorry, I didn't look where I was going." The man with the black hair said, "Yeah, whatever, just look where you're going next time." "I will," she said with another smile before leaving with something in her hand. "Wait. That bitch took our money," exclaimed the person with blonde hair, gesturing to Kuroka's wallets. With the fallen angels following, Kuroka began to run away. With a smile on his face, Naruto ran after them and said, "Nice move." Kuroka succeeded in persuading them to follow her into an alleyway off the side of the road. When she reached a dead end, she turned to face the 2 men behind them and said, "You made a real mistake stealing from us, you bitch." The blonde man with the angel wings sprouted. The black-haired one grinned evilly and said, "Yeah, looks like you have nowhere to go. Too bad we have to kill someone as hot as you." To their astonishment, she simply grinned and sat languidly, dropping their wallets. Her attitude was making the fallen angels angry. "You hurt me." "That's funny NYA, the blonde one screamed. "Don't laugh at us, or we'll kill you, girl." A voice behind them said, Why, you're hilarious. Naruto leaned against the wall and smiled at them. Kuroka dropped her illusion and nodded, saying, "Hey Kuroka, make sure you don't knock these guys out, we need answers." "A Nekomata?" one of them asked. The fallen angels summoned spears of light one after the other. Kuroka sprinted ahead, dodging the light spear. She materialized directly in front of the man with black hair and gave him a nasty kick to the abdomen. He flew back into the wall's side. As he attempted to swing his spear of light down on her, the blonde man yelled, "Rishi? You're going to pay." Before he could react, a solid kick was placed on his back, sending him flying as well. He staggered back and forth as he attempted to get himself off the ground. In an attempt to retaliate, he summoned another spear of light, but a kunai pierced his wrist and pinned his hand against the wall, causing him to scream. "Look, I don't want to hurt you any more than I have. Tell us what you know about the stray exorcists with the sacred gears." Naruto replied with seriousness. After taking a short breath, the man spat in Naruto's face. He hardly managed to contain his pain as he said, "Go to hell." Naruto sighs and wipes the spit from his face. Although he detests such things, a mission was a mission. Naruto stabbed the man's other wrist with another kunai. He yelled, "Ah!" into the air. Naruto said, "Talk." The man gritted his teeth and said, "Never." On the wall, the man's arms were pinned. Naruto zapped the man's chest after charging his hands with electricity. It was fortunate that he had installed those silencing seals because he screamed again, this time more loudly. He must have been a strong supporter of Kokebeel's methods because, to his credit, he was able to resist giving in after a few zaps. As Naruto's hand moved away from his chest, he gasped and exclaimed, "The fallen angels are meeting in the Saint Trinity Church. Tomorrow at 9. That's all I know, I swear." He felt sorry for the man because he didn't enjoy torturing people, but he had to know the facts. Naruto swiftly removed the kunai from the man's wrists and knocked him unconscious. When Kuroka knocked out her opponent and brought him to Naruto, she said, "So Saint Trinity Church NYA. He nodded, and Naruto remarked, "Tomorrow, we better hurry up and finish here." With a nod, she set up a magic circle to return the traitors to Grigori. What are they doing? After giving it some thought, Naruto left with Kuroka at his side. The hotel. As he sat there, Naruto wondered what these fallen angels and the users of the sacred gear might be up to. He was by himself in their hotel room, just gazing out the window. Kuroka was correct, though, as the night air was brightly lit by the buildings and streetlights. That was pretty to look at, and he was curious about Kuroka's whereabouts. His eyes grew wide as he turned to see her standing directly behind him, leaning against the bathroom door. She had nothing on but a towel wrapped around her body, and her breasts threatened to protrude from it as well. What are you doing?" Naruto squeaked out as his face flushed bright red. She replied nonchalantly, "I'm just about to take a shower NYA. Getting himself under control, Naruto said, "Oh, that's okay I guess." He turned away to avoid a similar reaction. As she approached him with a sly smile, she forced him to look at her by turning his head. "Do you want to take a shower with me? It will save some water NYA." She asked in a seductive tone as he turned to face her, blushing slightly. Naruto couldn't help but picture a completely nude Kuroka with hot water dripping over her body as soon as she said those words. With that sly expression she always had, he could picture her breasts moving around as she washed them. When a bulge began to form in his black pants, his face turned completely red. In an attempt to hide his area, he leapt quickly away from her and onto the bed face first. Kuroka remarked, clearly observing his behavior, "Oh, you seem quite excited at that idea NYA." In an attempt to block out those pictures, he buried his head in the pillow. Kurama chuckled to himself, "Bawahaha, you're still getting flustered over silly shit like this. These women amuse me, though I suppose it's just as much as you who is still the little punk-ass kid who gets embarrassed by a little teasing." Naruto would show Kurama, gritting his teeth. He was Naruto Uzumaki, the man who vanquished the Juubi, fought and defeated the Nine-Tailed Fox, and eliminated members of the Akatsuki. With a composed expression, he decided to give her a taste of her own medicine. "Yay, just take of that towel and we'll go, if you can." Naruto grinned at her. His response surprised Kuroka a little, but she smiled and let go of the hand holding her towel. She saw Naruto's face turn red as a tomato as he looked away before the towel fell, saying, "Well, let's go NYA." Damn, that backfired. He had no idea she would actually do it. He didn't allow Kurama's taunts to affect him again after that. Naruto said, "Why would do that?" He didn't think the girl would voluntarily strip in front of him. "I'm not ashamed of my body Naruto.kun NYA, she replied. It was true that she had previously diverted opponents with her body, and she would be at ease flaunting it in front of anyone. Still fighting to control himself, he said, Never mind, just go take a shower. How disappointing, she said, picking up her towel from the floor and heading to the restroom. Perhaps next time, NYA. Man, this girl was something. Naruto exhaled with relief as she walked away. Abruptly, he realized what he needed to do and rushed out of the room. 20 minutes later, Kuroka came out of the shower, enjoying the hot water's soothing effects. She was taken aback when she saw Naruto stumbling through the door while holding a box. She pointed to the little box he was holding and said, "What's that, NYA?" He handed her the box of candy and said, "These are something for you." She grinned at him and said, "Oh, a box of sweets, how romantic, NYA. Naruto appeared embarrassed. "Well, I mean, you've been paying for the hotel since we got here, since all I had was some pocket change. I know it's not a lot, but I just want you to have it. Another Neko show I know loves those types of sweets," he enthusiastically replied. The mention of her younger sister made her look down. She assumed that no one had informed him that the Neko show were essentially exterminated. Even so, she grinned. It was very kind of him to consider such things. It wasn't really a problem because she had a lot of money from all the missions she completed, but she assumed he was just being nice. She wasn't particularly romantic, and he only did it because he felt bad for her because she was paying for everything, but she would be lying if she didn't enjoy receiving chocolates from a man. "Thank you, I appreciate it, NYA. She was attractive, but this was something she had never encountered before. Grinning at her, he said, "This and cooking is the least I can do." Returning to her playful self, she nodded and asked, "Are you sure you don't want to sleep with me, NYA? He closed his eyes and lay on the couch, saying, "Nah, it's good, you can have the bed. It was going to be busy tomorrow." The Church of Saint Trinité. 5 minutes before the meeting was scheduled to begin, Naruto and Kuroka showed up. Naruto questioned, "Do you think the sacred gear users will be here?" "I don't know, it's a possibility that they're here for the meeting or in hiding just in case, NYA. She replied. Both of them were staring through a rooftop window. The structure was extremely old, most likely constructed and abandoned a few hundred years ago. As Kuroka and Naruto began to hide their presence and listen in, the fallen angels began filing into the room. A fat man asked, "What's the next step in Kokebile Sama's plan?" A thin, brown-haired man replied, "Our goal is to reignite the great war between the factions, so as such we will need to cause a commotion with the angels in the area." Naruto thought, angels? Were those the creatures he sensed when he switched into Sage mode? The same fat man said, "How about the devils, what will we do with them?" Kokebile Sama said he would deal with the devils soon enough and that we should focus on the angels. The slender individual stated. Naruto reasoned that he should alert Rias as soon as he arrived home. "What are we going to do?" a black-haired man asked. The same thin man said, "Simple, all we need to do is destroy one of the most precious things they own and the angels will start begging for a war." A blonde man asked, "Precious things? We have information that the angels' source of holy water is here in Paris. All of their holy water comes from inside the Saint Chapelle. Along with our sacred gear users, we'll take out the holy water. A war is sure to break out." They were all applauding. A brown-haired man said, "Someone go deliver the news to our exorcists and fallen angels at the other church." "Right away, sir," said a man in a tux, who then chose to fly out a window in the corner to reach the users of the sacred gear. Someone shouted, "Fuck the peace. The fallen angels deserve to rule all of heaven, earth, and hell," and got a lot of applause in return. Kuroka and Naruto were taking in all that they had discovered. Were they attempting to wage war in order to gain control of the other worlds? Naruto couldn't contain his rage at all the chaos, death, and devastation that had occurred in order to rise to the top. It was incredibly foolish. He would not allow war to occur because it was a horrible thing. Kuroka hurried to follow Naruto as he walked down the roof, saying, "Come on, Kuroka, we need to prepare for the attack." Suddenly, the roof gave way beneath her, and she began to fall. Before she could fall, Naruto hurried over and grabbed her arm. As he pulled her up, he said, "It's okay, I got you." The author chose to make it seem like a corny romance film, even though she didn't need assistance. "Thanks for the save. Looks like I can count on you, NYA, she said, approaching him and placing a hand on his chest. Naruto was about to express his embarrassment when he heard someone yell, "Someone's out there." Damn, they must have noticed the roof breaking. The stained glass was shattered into a million pieces as a massive number of fallen angels suddenly crashed through the window. The head of the fallen angel asked, "Who are you people?" Kuroka snarkily replied, "Don't worry about it, you won't be alive long enough to be worth it, NYA. As their anger grew, the man with the black hair said, "It doesn't matter who you are, you're going to die right here. We can't let our plans get out." Azazel didn't realize there were about 100 when he spoke so much. However, it made sense because Kokebile was a powerful figure and a leader of Grigori. They all smiled malevolently and called forth spears of light. The fallen angels yelled, "Kill them," and swung his hand forward. They all simultaneously hurled their light spears at Kuroka and Naruto. Kuroka attempted to dodge, but Naruto moved in front of her before she could do so. He began reciting hand signals before shouting, "Wood style. Domed wall jutsu." Suddenly, wood exploded from the roof, enclosing the two of them in a dome. Despite stabbing into the wood, none of the spears were able to penetrate. "This is new NYA. I was shocked that he was capable of such a thing." She smiled and said, "Of course I can NYA." He nodded and released the jutsu. "Yeah, but once this wall goes down you think you can handle the ones on the right?" One fallen angel remarked, "Never seen anyone do magic like that before." Another said, "Doesn't matter, just kill them." After exchanging glances, Naruto and Kuroka grinned and hurried off in the direction of the fallen angels. They were hit by hundreds of light spears. They ran left and right, avoiding every spear. Dispersed fragments of the rooftop flew in every direction. Out of the corner of Naruto's eye, he saw Kuroka fighting Hand.to. Hand with dozens of fallen angels, her senjutsu. Enhanced strength tearing through them. Naruto turned his attention back to the opponents in front of him. As the fallen angels began to call forth more spears of light, he saw a few signs. Naruto slammed his hands to the ground and screamed, "Earth style. Dark chasm jutsu." The roof beneath them started to tremble, and the fallen angels started to stagger. Abruptly, the roof broke, allowing some of the fallen angels to fall through. He took out a large portion of them there, and Naruto smiled as they fell. When they simply flew back up, he stopped smiling. "You know we're fallen angels, right, kid?" he said mockingly as the others laughed. "Yeah, forgot they could do that," Naruto said with a drop of sweat. Before he had to avoid a light spear, he was thinking. Before spewing a lot of water out of his mouth, he said, "How about this water style? Water bullet jutsu." The fallen angels were struck hard by the powerful stream of water that was headed their way as the attack struck squarely. When the fallen angels began to rise, Naruto made a cross with his hands and said, "Shadow clone jutsu." A clone then appeared beside him. The two Narutos began going through the signs. Fire style, great fireball jutsu, wind style, great breakthrough, they both said before releasing a fireball and a strong gust of wind. Even Kuroka's opponents turned to watch the explosion as the attack struck, causing a massive fire to break out. A significant portion of the church was destroyed in the attack. After witnessing Naruto's abilities, the fallen angels were on guard as the smoke cleared. When the dust finally settled, they were shocked to see him gone. A fallen angel laughed and said, "The pussy ran away." As he regained their confidence, the others began to laugh with him. Then everything vanished when they noticed a yellow flash appear behind the fallen angel who had said it. The discovery of a kunai lodged in his throat only made them more appalled. After turning around, Naruto began to rush into the center of the small group. There was no mercy as he slashed left and right with the wind chakra. Infused kunai, shattering the light spears that came his way. No matter how hard they tried, the fallen angels were unable to hit him, and Naruto simply destroyed them one by one. The few standing fallen angels were drenched and on the verge of urinating. Choosing to complete his openly soft with a single move, Naruto leapt back. The roof collapsed beneath the fallen angel's feet, and a massive pillar of swirling air emerged as he placed his palms on the ground and said, "Wind style. Geyser eruption jutsu." The force was so strong that it tore apart other parts of the church and sucked it into the miniature tornado. Naruto looked around after the jutsu subsided. All of his opponents appeared to have been beaten so badly or were wet dead that they would not recall the events of the morning. When he turned around, he saw Kuroka pierce someone's chest with her fingers, cutting off their ki flow and killing them. She wiped some blood from her hand and remarked, "That went a lot smoother with you, NYA. He nodded and said, "We have to get to the Saint Chapelle and warm the angels." He smiled a little and said, "You were pretty good too." She smiled back, "Thank you for the compliment, NYA. She consented, and they left behind a bloody scene in a rather damaged church. Church of Saint Chapelle. Yujutsu, what is that? Naruto asked as he walked next to Kuroka. Yujutsu is a special style for the Ukai faction. Since it involves chakra, I think you can use it too, NYA. She told him. He became very enthusiastic about using a new method. In a suggestive tone, she added, "I can teach it to you, among other things, NYA. With all the teasing, Naruto only blushed a little this time. "Oh, is that right? I would like it if you could teach it to me," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. It appears that he was growing accustomed to this kind of behavior. In the same tone, she nodded and said, I would be glad to teach you everything I know NYA. Naruto hurried to find something to divert his attention from the attractive women standing next to him. He accelerated, saying, oh look, it's the church, we better get going. Before catching up with him, she smiled and thought, so innocent. Naruto used the body flicker technique to get Kuroka and himself inside. Naruto said, I can sense their energy signatures, follow me. They couldn't help but be in awe of the chapel's beauty as they strolled through the corridors. The walls and ceilings were made of pure white marble with patterns covered in gold. The entire space was enormous and appeared to be very costly. Naruto said, come into this room. It appeared that someone lived in this room. Aside from the standard marble and gold, there was a very attractive desk with some papers on it. The fireplace was in the very front. Above an extremely worn out carpet, there were some lovely green couches in the center of the space. Naruto remarked, I sense them behind the wall. He approached the wall and gave it a thorough examination. Kuroka said, how do we get through NYA? Simple. He said, backing away from the wall, and then punched the wall with tremendous force. All right, that worked. The portion of that wall was gone entirely. Before entering the gap, Naruto uttered the words, let's go, shall we? After a minute of being shocked that he would do such a thing, she sighed and trailed behind him. Wow, look at all those stairs. Naruto remarked as they came to a halt and froze at what they saw. They couldn't tell how many there were, but there was a huge staircase that led down into the darkness. As he descended the stairs, Naruto said, let's get going then. They looked up to see something incredible as they eventually descended the stairs, sweating and panting from all the steps they had to take. When they saw a massive dome filled with numerous trees and flowers, their eyes grew wide. However, there was a massive black and gold gate in front of it, guarded by two angels. An angel with long brown hair and blue eyes, who appeared to be dressed like a priestess and had a sword at her hip, said, halt, you people do not belong here. I'm sorry, there is something really important I need to tell the angels, so could you take me to whoever is in charge of this place? Replied Naruto. He glanced at the angel in private, taking in her bright halo and the white angel wings emerging from her back. He had to admit that this woman was stunning. That must be the reason she was an angel, he surmised. She glanced at him as well, and she could clearly see the warmth and purity of his soul. She couldn't let him go, even though she honestly thought he was the purest person she had ever seen. She pulled her sword from its sheath and aimed it at them. The angel realized Kuroka was a devil and said, I'm sorry, only angels and top-tier priests can go in here. You can't come in here, especially not her. After observing the looks Naruto gave her, Kuroka growled at her, saying, what's the deal, bitch? NYA? Naruto was her mate. With a far more reserved tone, she said, I don't like your language, and for your information, this is a sacred place to us angels, and we don't just let anyone in here. In a somewhat pleading voice, he said, look, we know the fallen angels are planning an attack on this place tomorrow. Just please let us in, we need to talk. An assault on the chapel, her eyes grew wide. It was difficult not to believe Naruto because of the urgency and purity on his face. She sighed and turned back after biting her lip. The angel assumed she could make an exception because it was an attack on holy property, so she said, open the gate, it's important. With a nod, the other guard yanked a lever on the gate. Slowly, the gates opened, revealing the dome's entrance. As he entered, the angel said, follow me. They gasped as soon as they were inside the dome. The area was breathtaking, with sidewalks leading down some sections to other locations and lush grass covering the entire ground. There was an abundance of flowers everywhere, in every possible color and variety. In various locations, there were also a lot of trees. The problem was that the dome had several levels, complete with the animals and greenery found on the first floor. The fountains, however, were the most obvious feature. There were fountains all over the place. Some were placed in the middle of the intersection of some sidewalks, while others were encircled by trees and flowers. Overall, it appeared to be a really lovely location. The angel turned and walked away after saying, Genevieve Sama is out on that clearing. A large camp was set up when Kuroka and Naruto entered the clearing. Many angels were seated there, laughing and enjoying themselves. One of them asked, who are you? And the other angels turned to face them. When they realized Kuroka was a devil, they became frightened and called forth spears of light. Naruto and Kuroka take a defensive stance and say, please, we don't come to fight. We have some things to tell you. His earnest tone made the angels pause, but they recalled their responsibility. The guard let us in. We have some important information for someone named Genevieve, Naruto said, hinting that he might be working for this devil. A woman with green eyes and long, curly black hair emerged from a tent. Like all girls, she had a voluptuous figure. The fact that she had 6 wings emerging from her back startled him a little. She smiled and said in a beautiful voice, "Yes, do you need something?" An angel started to say, "Genevieve. Sama, these people are intruders we should at." But Genevieve interrupted him by holding up her hand. She gestured for Naruto to say what he wanted to say, saying, "Let's just hear them out, shall we? If they try to attack, we have the numbers." Naruto nodded and continued, "We overheard a meeting with some Rouge fallen angels, and they are sending some sacred gear users to take this place. We know they are trying to ignite another great war." She was informed by Naruto. Her expression changed to one of alarm. "How many are there?" she inquired, attempting to gauge the danger. Naruto appeared to be thinking. "Don't know, about half of them were killed thanks to me and my friend here. We think there are about 100 left and some sacred gear users." "We think the sacred gear users. The sacred gear users are not to be underestimated since Azazel warned us about them," said Naruto. She nodded, searching for dishonesty but failing. "Thank you for dealing with the fallen angels and the tip we will prepare for the attack." Naruto replied, "Actually we want to join in on the defense. Azazel told us to capture these scared gear users." She smiled at him. "Thank you so much, child, we would be more than grateful for your help." "Hey, the more help the better, and if they were sent by one of Grigori's own leaders, they must be powerful." She was surprised by his purity, just like the guard at the gate. "Everyone, we have enemies coming here tomorrow. Set up the defenses," shouted Genevieve. All of the angels started pacing the camp quickly and frantically right away. As she entered one of the tents, Genevieve said, "Could you please follow me?" They followed her inside and noticed how spacious it was. As she turned to face the angels, they remarked, "I think we should be able to handle it. We have defensive systems and a good amount of angels too." "I was expecting more angels, how come you have so little?" Naruto replied. "We kept this place a secret and it hasn't been found out by anyone but the angels for centuries, so we don't have a huge army here. Even though this place is incredibly important, over the centuries we thought no one would attack, so angels started moving to other areas. I wonder how they could have found this place," she replied. "I know you're already helping in the attack, but could you please help the angels set up the barricade?" Genevieve said with a smile. Kuroka sighed, but Naruto appeared prepared to assist, saying, "Sure, we'll be glad to help out." How could he turn down such a kind woman? As they prepared to depart, Genevieve added, "S3 will be in the main water source area so we can defend the most crucial part of the system if it comes down to it." Both of them demonstrated understanding and departed the tent. An angel led them to a tent after they had completed preparing the defense against the attack. "Please, you have had a long night, could we offer you a place to rest for the night?" He pointed to the tent. Naruto expressed gratitude to him. These people had been quite understanding. When they entered the tent, they discovered a single, conveniently large sleeping bag. She smirked at Naruto and remarked, "Looks like we're sleeping together NYA. Why?" "Yeah, I guess so." He swallowed and turned to see her lying on her side with her hands supporting her head. He tensed up and lay down on the bag, saying, "You coming or what NYA?" He felt arms encircle him right away. It was going to be a long evening tonight. The following morning, after rubbing the sleep from his eyes, Naruto awoke blearily. He felt a lot of pressure on his chest as he attempted to sit up. Kuroka was sleeping peacefully on his chest when he looked up. For once, instead of feeling ashamed, he smiled at her serene face and the way she was curled up in a ball, like a cat. He concluded that he had to wake Genevieve up in order for them to reach the location she had instructed. He gave her a gentle shake and said, "Kuroka, get up, the fallen angels are going to come any time now." She meowed like a cute kitten and sat up, raising one hand in the air. She smiled as she sat on his chest and asked, "Did you have a nice sleep, NYA?" He rolled his eyes and said, attempting to stand up, "Yeah, it was great, we have to go meet Genevieve." She simply lay on top of him after pushing him back down. Then, with a seductive smile, she brought her face close to his and said, "Let's just stay here for 5 more minutes NYA. He might have been able to handle some of her teasing, but not this." He blushed at the words. At the tent's entrance, an angel said clumsily, Excuse me, but Genevieve. Sama requests your presences." After giving thanks to God for saving him from that predicament, Naruto looked at her and said, "Right away, Kuroka." With a sigh, she obeyed, and they both got to their feet. Naruto grinned at the angel and said, "Lead the way." The main center of holy water, they led Naruto to a large room on the upper floor. There was glass along the walls, and water was running along the bottom, resembling an aquarium. Naruto surmised that the main source of holy water was the enormous fountain in the middle, which was nearly as tall as the Hokage Tower. Genevieve had her hands in the water. This is where all the holy water comes from in the world. This place was made by King Louis IX in 1294, he was one of the most firmest believers in God. Holy water is a way for humans to cleanse their sins and are used by common people to be free from their sins when they come to church. She motioned for Naruto to come nearer. Kuroka just stood there looking anxious, but Naruto was perplexed as she led his hand into the water as he arose. Of course, everyone knew what holy water did, but to Naruto, it was all new. It's extremely important that we keep this safe or else who knows what would happen to all our followers. He had to admit that it was pleasant and soothing to run his hand through the water. Genevieve cupped her hands in the water and held it up to Naruto's face, saying, "Here, take a drink." He didn't think there would be any harm in atoning for any sins he might have committed in his lifetime. He felt happier and was astonished to experience a slight haze in his head after drinking the water. "You know, it's surprising, you're the most pure person I've ever met, and judging by how you're reacting you've never had a drink of holy water, which is impressive," she responded. Then he considered his past and wondered if he was truly such a good person. If he claimed he didn't adore the way those girls looked, he would be lying. He surmised that the only sin he truly committed was spying on them for his sexy jutsu. It was difficult to avoid the sin of lust. Suddenly, a loud explosion was heard. "They're here, let's hope the defense was enough to stop them," said Genevieve. After 10 minutes Naruto was becoming nervous because he could hear a lot of shouting and explosions coming from below. As a reward for the warning, the angels were given strict instructions to eliminate Naruto and Kuroka's sacred users. Abruptly, 4 strangers wearing identical outfits entered the room through the large doors. They were all dressed in black trench coats and black fedoras. A female voice said, "Damn, those angels were sure piece of work, it took us forever to get around them." "It doesn't matter, Siana. Even though we managed to avoid confrontation with the angels we still have some company." A man replied. "We'll take them out easy, Drix." Another Siana replied. "My, what a handsome young man, don't you think so, Vori?" A woman replied. Vori replied, "I don't swing that way, Iza." The strange thing about these guys was that they all had brown eyes and black hair, with the exception of Iza, the girl, who wore purple lipstick. Genevieve stood up and said, "Unfortunately, you stray exorcists won't be going any farther." Drix shook his head and said, "Look who we're going against. I don't know about the kid with the silver hair, but we're going against a 6-winged angel and Kuroka the SS class stray devil." Naruto turned to Kuroka so quickly that he might have broken his neck. Vori sneered. "Well, it looks like we have the advantage in terms of numbers." Was Kuroka a wandering devil? He perceived a sinister power emanating from both the fallen angels and the devils. Naruto had assumed Kuroka was a fallen angel. Naturally, he was unaware that fallen angels were not subject to reincarnation. What terrible thing did Kuroka do to earn SS class status? Only those who killed or betrayed their masters were considered strays. Kuroka undoubtedly remembered everything that had contributed to her becoming a stray devil as she looked down. Without the customary NYA, Kuroka said, "Naruto, I'll explain later, just let's get this done first." He ignored all the questions and concentrated on the fight because he didn't really have a choice. Vori smiled and said, "Let's get this over with." A dark black glow began to emanate from a necklace around his neck. Drix cracked his knuckles and dark brown gloves appeared on his hands. On Siana's neck, a matching white necklace materialized. At last, a blue gem appeared on Iza's head. Giving him a playful smile, he said, "Let's see what you can do against Tempest Blast Naruto-kun." The gem then glowed blue, and a massive storm cloud materialized above them all. All of them had to duck out of the way when a lightning strike suddenly came from the cloud. The blow created a huge, gaping hole in the floor and split it. Drix slammed his hands on the ground after saying, "Don't get caught up by vine entrapment." Abruptly, an enormous number of branches and vines shot out from the floor and ceiling in all directions, coming toward them. While Kuroka and Naruto had to weave through the vines to get out of the way, Genevieve flew up and avoided them, before launching a basketball-sized fireball at the vines. Naruto leapt back and ran through seals, saying, "Fire style. Pulse blast jutsu." The attack broke up the vines as soon as it made contact, exploding in a massive eruption of fire. Siana said, "Interesting, but your fire makes light eternal ablaze." She then raised her hand, and a massive burst of light burst from it. What the hell? Man, those guys were the issue. Naruto and Kuroka had to dodge once more as Genevieve used a light shield to block the hug attack. Vori raised his own hand and remarked, "You can deal with light, but what about Bringer of Darkness?" The room's lighting caused a number of shadows to suddenly come to life and run in their direction. The shadows mercilessly attacked them, forcing them to hop around. Damn, these guys had some really awesome powers. The shadow one in particular made him think of the powers of the Nara clan. He grinned as he avoided another shadow that pierced the floor after realizing something. With loud hand clapping, he said, "Fire style, Hellfire Clap Jutsu." All of them were suddenly encircled by a massive ring of fire that illuminated the entire space. "Flames can't stop my shadows," cried Vori, bewildered when the shadows abruptly vanished. "No, but if the whole room is lit up like this you have no shadows to work with." Naruto recalled the weakness in Nara's method. Naruto materialized behind Vori in a dazzling burst of yellow, sending him hurtling back into Kuroka with a forceful kick. After slightly rejecting her senjutsu, Kuroka stabbed him in the stomach. He slumped to the ground after coughing up some blood. Naruto remarked, "Damn, that was kind of easy." Before hurling several balls of light at them, Siana said, "Don't get confident he was the weakest." Naruto darted around in an attempt to swiftly render her unconscious. Drix moved in front of him and deflected his blow before he could land it. The large man attempted to nail Naruto in the face, but Naruto stepped aside. A blow was aimed at him, but Naruto leapt backward to avoid it, shattering the floor. Before rushing to Drix and attempting to kick him in the side, Naruto remarked, "Very strong for someone without chakra." Naruto thought, maybe I should start trying now, before leaping up and giving him a hard kick to the head. He took the hit with no effect and gave Naruto a nasty grin. Drix stumbled back, then straightened out and confronted Naruto again. Iza and Kuroka, as she watched Naruto punch Drix into a wall, she remarked, "How I wish I had such a man with me." Kuroka said, "Lay off slut nya, oh did the cat already claim him? I might have to take him from you, he would look good chained to my bedside." Iza was licking her lips. That's the type of girl she was. Before running over to her, Kuroka said, "Yeah right bitch, I'd like to see you try." The only person who made sexual remarks about Naruto was her. Before several lightning strikes that were all directed at Kuroka erupted, Iza raised both of her hands to the sky. Kuroka's extraordinary speed and agility allowed her to avoid them all before. She confronted Iza and gave her a forceful punch to the face. A cloud unexpectedly appeared in Kuroka's face before she was swiped and skidded back. She bounced back quickly before facing Iza once more. She punched him in the midsection, but Iza blocked it and raised a foot to kick Kuroka in the head. Before twisting and hurling her into the glass, Kuroka was able to seize her foot. Iza smashed through the glass, releasing a tiny jet of water. Kuroka watched as Iza stepped out of the glass unscathed, saying, "Big mistake." Iza then electrocuted the water below. The water touching Kuroka's feet gave her a very painful zap. When she looked up, she was struck in the head. After some time to orient herself, she got up and began tapping purple symbols into the air, being careful to reduce the dosage so as not to kill Iza. A purple mist then fell upon them. Before collapsing to the ground and vanishing like one of Naruto's shadow clones, Iza began to cough and heck. "That's some mist you got there, I want to step it up though," Iza said, laughing from a cloud above her, just before electricity engulfed her entire body. This was going to be difficult, damn it. Genevieve and Siana, another concentrated light beam came at her, and Genevieve had to block it. Before sending Genevieve a stream of light, Siana said, "Let's see who's better at using light." She avoided it, created a massive light spear, and threw it at Siana. She created a wall of light to deflect the blow, and it was successful because the light spear vanished. The wall was then hurled at Genevieve, but a massive sword of light sliced it in two. With the sword in hand, Genevieve charged at Siana and began to attack her. A wall of light appeared to deflect them, and the sword was repeatedly blocked. Genevieve let out a scream and then used all of her strength to slam the sword down on Siana, breaking the wall of light. The wall broke, and Siana was blown back, creating a dome of light just in time to deflect Genevieve's blow. With each blow, the dome cracked slightly as Genevieve Pearly struck it with her massive sword. It was difficult for Siana to resist Genevieve's strength. Siana had to roll out of the way to avoid being nearly impaled by a sword strike after the dome finally broke. When she looked up, a massive two-sided hammer struck her. She was implanted several meters above the ground after crashing back into the wall. Genevieve threw two spears of light as she was about to collapse, tearing through her clothes and pinning her to the wall. She said, "The Lord will have justice," as she flew up to where the exorcist was hanging, and then she struck the woman in the head with her hammer, knocking her unconscious. Drix and Naruto. When Naruto kicked Drix to the ground once more, he appeared battered. The man flexed his fingers and stood up shakily, shouting, "You're not going to win." He then slammed his hands together. All of a sudden, he had glowing yellow eyes and was covered in a wood-like casing. Before attempting to block a punch, Naruto thought of body armor, and was shocked to see how powerful it was. In order to defeat Drix once more, Naruto skidded back and slightly increased his strength. He gave Drix a devastating uppercut. Drix was kicked aging while in the air as he flew upward. He crashed into the ground, causing a massive crater upon impact. Before he saw a yellow flash and a massive blue ball slam into his entire body, he attempted to stand up and succeeded. Naruto finished his attack by saying, Rasengan. Drix's armor broke as he flew through the air. He collapsed to the ground, unconscious. Iza and Kuroka. When Naruto and Genevieve arrived on the scene, Kuroka was just avoiding a lightning bolt. Before they heard a loud boom of thunder, she screamed to the sky, "Oh? You guys managed to defeat Siana and Drix, huh? No matter, I'll take care of you once and for all." Suddenly, a tremendous amount of lightning began to zap in all directions from the clouds above, making numerous holes in the ground. Kuroka and Naruto were able to shelter under Naruto's wooden dome, but Genevieve was attempting to avoid every blow while flying through the storm. "Ah!" she exclaimed as a lightning strike struck her, causing her to fall to the ground like a duck launched from the sky. Genevieve lay on the ground, her wings trying to flap behind her, blood streaming from her mouth and side. Iza remarked, "Looks like we're having some bird for dinner." She then charged a sizable quantity of electricity in her hands and directed a stream of lights in Genevieve's direction. Naruto emerged just as the lighting was ready to touch the surface and began reading the signs. Before directing his strategy toward the lightning strike and directing a focused gust of wind at it, he declared, "Wind style, volant wind palm." The wind split in half and moved directly out of the path of the lightning strike, which surprised him. As the lightning strike approached, his eyes grew wide. What on earth took place? What caused his attack to break up that way? What was he supposed to do? Damn it! He would have to leave Genevieve behind in order to teleport to one of his Hiroshin kunais. There was no way he would leave her behind, he sighed. He turned around and hurled Genevieve out of his way before the blow hit him, hardening his eyes and knowing that he would do the right thing. Kuroka and Genevieve both cried out, "Naruto," as they saw Naruto burn to a crisp. A heap of ash was all that remained. How disappointing, he was so cute too. Tempest Blast can control wind and water too. It wouldn't be much of a storm if you didn't have those, would it? Did you see the look on his face as his attack split in half? She was chuckling. Although Kuroka had only known Naruto for a few days, they had already accomplished a great deal together, so she was torn between being furious and in shock. Working with him to defeat those fallen angels was a lot of fun. Actually, she had never had this much fun before. Everything was made interesting by his exuberant and playful demeanor. Like she did with Naruto, she could never play around with any of the fallen angels back at Grigori. He even showed her some affection. During their brief time together, she had known he was a wonderful person, but she didn't really grow attached to him. He was the purest person Genevieve had ever met, in fact. By saving an angel at the expense of his own life, he ultimately died a good death as well. She was happy to call him a friend even though he wasn't exactly her partner as she had hoped. Making sure that his sacrifice wasn't in vain was the least she could do. Sacred gear be damned, Kuroka decided it was time to destroy her. The impact was instantaneous when she raised her hand. Because of the tremendous force applied to her, Iza crashed into the ground, feeling as though an elephant was crushing her. As her organs began to compress and squish, blood began to pool out of her mouth. It was a terrible and excruciating experience. This was worse than the worst kind of torture there was. When Kuroka felt a hand on her shoulder just as she was about to finish her, she released the pressure and turned to look behind her. When she saw Naruto grinning worriedly at her, she gasped. He pointed to himself and said, "Hey, it's all right, no need to kill her." "I'm fine, look." That made Kuroka chuckle a little. He said nonchalantly, "How are you alive, NYA?" He scratched his head and said, "I just dodged, it wasn't that hard." Despite her desire to slap him for being so carefree, she refrained and instead gave him a genuine smile and said, "Yes, I'm glad you're not hurt, NYA. Let's round up all the exorcists and get Genevieve to a medic." He responded. She nodded, indicating that she would undoubtedly talk to Naruto frequently going forward. The aftermath now covered in bandages, Genevieve said, "I thank you guys once again for helping in defeating those stray exorcists." With a low bow, she said, "I also appreciate you saving my life, Naruto." He pretended it wasn't a huge deal and said, "It was nothing, I would have done it for anyone." He was really a wonderful person, she said with a smile. She would see to it that he was mentioned to the people in heaven. "Well, if that all, I want you to know that you should visit sometimes." Genevieve replied. Naruto stood beside Kuroka and waved, saying, "I'll keep that in mind." Naruto said, "I'll see you later, Genevieve." As he began to leave the dome, she waved back at him and said, "Goodbye." "So we have a long time left to go through to the city Nya," Kuroka replied. Who knows what might have happened if Naruto hadn't been present? He gave her a startlingly serious look and said, "I need to ask you some questions first." The fact that she knew exactly what he was going to ask her made her look irritated. The hotel he stood next to the bed she was sitting on and asked, "You're a stray devil?" She replied, "Yes." She wasn't particularly eager to tell him what happened. "Kuroka, I'm sure whatever you did wasn't that bad, but the Rouge Devil I met was batshit crazy. You look like a good person, but I don't know if I could trust a stray. Especially if they're SS class," he said while sitting next to her. She appears to consider it. She had already told her team at Grigori, including Valley, who didn't give a damn, so it wasn't like she had any trouble telling the story. She reasoned that it would be best to tell him right away so he wouldn't lose faith in her after learning about it from someone else. "I suppose I was going to tell you later on, but I'll just tell you now. My sister Sharon and I lived on the side of the street for several years, surviving by only stealing and searching for scraps. One day a devil came up to me and demanded that me and her become part of his peerage. He didn't really give us an option, it was either join or die. I obviously joined along with Sharon and we lived a more easier life then. But then when I heard about some awful things they were going to do to my sister, I couldn't let them, so I mastered Senjutsu and killed out Master along with some other devils in the peerage. Everyone said it was a result of Senjutsu that make the user go insane, which it does, but I already had it under control, and ordered the annihilation of my species. The only survivors are me and my sister. Senjutsu is very powerful and feared, so I was labeled SS class stray." Telling him basically her tale, he asked, "Senjutsu makes you do insane?" After dealing with Kurama's negative energy for years, he assumed he didn't really notice this world's. "Yes, why haven't you experienced trying to fight the darkness?" he asked. He answered, "No, I can't say I have." He put the pieces together and said, "She goes by Naneko." She nodded and said gravely, "I call her Sharon because that's the name I gave her when out mom died Nya. Now she hates me so much because she believes everything the devil said, that she even changed her name Nya." Naruto was staring at this. Living on the streets while caring for a child, having to steal every night to survive, having your entire species killed, and then having your own sister hate you because she heard some messed up crap. Man, that was tough for her. There was something about Kuroka that made him think of Itachi. After learning about everything Kuroka had to endure, he made a promise to himself that he would always be her friend. With determination, he turned to face her and said, "I'm making a promise to you that I'll clear your name and reunite you with your sister. You would do that for me? But why? I know we got along these past couple of days, but we barely know each other Nya." She asked, looking at him strangely. "So what? You're a person in need and it's not right for your sister to be kept in the dark like that," he said, staring into her eyes. He said that as if it were the most obvious thing in the world, and she grinned. He was genuinely unique. She was confident that Naruto could accomplish it in some way. "Thank you Nya. So, I feel it's fair that you tell me a little bit about you now Nya," she responded. After giving it some thought, Naruto realized that she had essentially told him her tragic story without protest. They talked about their lives for the rest of the night because he thought it was only right that he said something and that he only needed to change a few things. Naruto took a seat on the couch and sighed. 3 days had passed since the conflict with the users of sacred gear. During that time, a few things occurred. A few nights ago, he had a lengthy conversation with Kuroka. As promised, he had filled her in on his life, but he had made sure to highlight the good moments, such as getting to know his friends, working out with Jiraiya, and playing with Grandma Suande. Evidently, he took care to omit any information about a village or their ability to use chakra. She had shared with him some of the things she and Kaneko had done while living on the streets. It turns out that they were quite the jokers when they were younger, occasionally playing tricks on the devils. He grinned at that, realizing how ironic it was that he had done the same things as a child. Over the past few days, he and Kuroka have also been training. She has attempted to teach him Yujutsu, and he has attempted to teach her some fundamental chakra techniques. Aside from that, Naruto had spent the majority of his time using shadow clones to try to master another sub-element that he had unlocked. Since this specific element had a value that the others did not, it had been among the first that he had attempted to use. Aside from that, he thought Paris was awesome and enjoyed the people and scenery. His neck, which was encircled by a dress shirt collar, itched as he sighed. He was blacked out at the moment. He had on a silky black tie, black dress pants supported by a nice black leather belt, and a black dress shirt. Indeed, Kuroka had succeeded in luring Naruto to ask her out on a date by threatening him. Despite his protests, she said she would take care of it, even though he had tried to point out that he had no money. He was sitting on the couch, all set to go. He had never gone on a date before, so to be honest, he was a little anxious. Shouldn't he have brought her flowers or something? Since he wasn't very skilled at all of this, he was worried that he would make a mistake. She teased him for a while before telling him not to worry about it and to think of it as friends going out. He thought the black outfit complemented his silver hair. He wouldn't wear something orange because that would be foolish. Even he knew that orange and his hair didn't go together, despite his lack of sense of style. Naruto considered the peerage's performance. Rias would face Riser in the rating game in a week, and he wasn't sure if they had what it took to prevail. While he waited for Kuroka to prepare, he gazed at the ceiling and wondered if Rias had what it took to prevail. From the door, he heard Kuroka say, "Hey, I'm ready to go NYA." He turned to face her and found himself at a loss for words. She wore a black dress with no straps, and her leg was exposed by a slit down the side. The dress hugged her body, revealing her curves and breasts, and behind her back, where the zipper should have been, was a bunch of strings that were loosely tied together. Any man would find it alluring. "What?" Stunned, speechless NYA. She said, striking a very sexy pose, grinning at his response. In fact, he was stunned and unable to speak. His face blushed. In some ways, this was worse than when she threw the towel. The dress seemed to be making fun of him. He felt as though it was luring him to look underneath. If only he could remove it. To get rid of his perverted thoughts, he shook his head. After calming down, he gave her a clumsy smile and complimented her, saying, "You look really nice." "Thank you, you look handsome as well NYA. She smiled flirtatiously at him. Being called handsome by a girl made him feel proud, and he blushed a little at the compliment. He got up and opened the door for her like a gentleman, saying, "Thanks, let's get going then." As they reached the lobby, Naruto remarked, "You didn't tell me where we were going." She grinned and proceeded to the elevator. Glancing at him, she said, "That's a surprise NYA." She laughed at his disappointed expression before continuing on her way. Naruto was a little taken aback when he heard Kuroka say, "You know you were supposed to offer me your arm NYA." He had occasionally witnessed couples do that. "Well?" she inquired eagerly. Here," he said clumsily, extending his arm in a moment of panic. She accepted it with pleasure and remarked, "Much better NYA." Leaning into his arm, she spoke. Although he blushed slightly at what she was doing, he had to admit that it felt good to have a gorgeous girl dangling from your arm. After a few minutes, they came to a stop in front of the Eiffel Tower, where Kuroka made Naruto stop with her. Since it was night and the tower was completely illuminated, they had to admit it was spectacular. It was a sight to behold, towering and magnificent, and incredibly beautiful. He turned to face Kuroka after taking his sights off the tower and asked, "Why are we here?" as he became perplexed. She dragged Naruto along as she walked towards the monument, saying, "We're going to have dinner here NYA." "You mean there's a restaurant on that thing?" he asked, sounding a little skeptical. He thought that was pretty cool. "Of course you can, it's one of the best restaurants in Paris NYA," she replied. He was taken aback that she had reserved such a fine dining establishment. She was spending a lot of money on him, which made him feel a little bad, but he had warned her about it before, but she ignored him. They had reached the man in charge of reservations after climbing the enormous tower to the restaurant. He noticed how elegant and lovely the restaurant appeared when he peered inside. Since Naruto wasn't very comfortable in these kinds of situations, everything seemed a bit too much for him. She nodded and put her arm around Naruto's as she followed the waiter, saying, "I have your reservations, ma'am. Follow me to your table." Stunned by the women in front of them, many men turned to stare at Kuroka and began to gawk. Then they noticed that she had her arm around the arm of a man with silver hair, and they gave him a jealous look as they considered how fortunate he was. Their dates slapped them and began yelling at them for staring at other women while they made small talk before they could continue to stare. The jealous looks they gave him made Naruto smile because it seemed like he had the most attractive date here. Kuroka and Naruto took a seat at a table close to the railing's edge. He smiled slightly and said, "Here are your menus. I will be back shortly to take your order." After thanking him and acknowledging that she understood what he had said, Kuroka started to browse her menu when she heard Naruto make a sound. "Oh, what's good here?" he said, perplexedly examining the menu. She grinned at his bewildered expression as he struggled to understand the French menu. "The lobster is really good, you should have some NYA." He nodded in agreement, realizing that she would be far more knowledgeable than he was about this. After returning and taking their order, the waiter said, "I'll be right back with your food." He grinned once more before heading out. They decided to talk while they waited for the food. Naruto laughed and exclaimed, Then Granny Suande punched him clear through the wall. Kuroka didn't seem to mind that he was drawing a lot of attention for being so noisy in a formal setting. She laughed and covered her mouth, saying, "Your sensei was a big pervert Naruto-kun." Naruto certainly had a lot of amusing tales to share. One was about Suande pursuing Jiraiya after he attempted to enter her home covertly to get a glimpse of her taking a shower, and the way he was describing it with animated hand gestures only made it more interesting. Her pursuit of him through the town while essentially nude left everyone in awe. With a warm smile, Naruto remarked, "Yes, he was, but he was still a good guy." Plates of food were brought to their table by the waiter. Before tending to other tables, he said, "Here you go, I hope you enjoy." Naruto had never eaten lobster before, so he needed some assistance from Kuroka to figure out how to eat it. He loved every bite of the meat after he figured out how to get to it. It was delicious, not bad, but not as good as ramen. They enjoyed their meals and chatted and laughed during the remainder of their time at the dinner table. Kuroka took Naruto to a higher level of the tower after they had finished their meal and paid for it. On the highest floor you could reach, they materialized on a balcony. They both moved to the railing's edge and took in the city. When they saw the lights from the enormous tower, the wind was blowing in their faces. The beauty of Paris enthralled Kuroka. It was truly magnificent. As Kuroka gazed at the candlelight of the city below, Naruto watched her relish the wind in her face. Naruto couldn't help but find her attractive. Her normally naughty face was serene and serene. With a small, contented smile on her face and her hair blowing wildly behind her, she looked like a work of art as she leaned over the railing. What could surpass this view, Naruto realized, and that's why she loved Paris. And anyone could feel amazing from the serenity and ease you could experience up from this tower, away from the stress of this world. It was a devil's paradise. "This is the 5th time I've been to Paris and it never gets old NYA, she told him. He approached her side and peered down. "I can see why, it's hard for this to ever get old," he replied. She gave a nod, and they stood there taking in the scenery for a few minutes. She turned away from the railing and sighed, "We should go, I still want to walk in the park NYA. Before turning around and catching up to her, Naruto gave her one last glance. As they strolled through the restaurant once more, Naruto reflected on how well this evening was going. Kuroka appeared to be having fun with him, which pleased him because he had intended to make this lighthearted for her. He ran into someone who was spilling alcohol on them because he was too preoccupied to notice what was in front of him. Feeling bad about spilling alcohol on this man, he said, "I'm so sorry, I didn't see you there." When Naruto offered to help them up, 2 men went to assist him instead, and his hand was smacked away. Naruto noticed that the man was rather overweight, had short black hair, and glasses when the men helped him up. 2 attractive women were standing behind him, clinging to his shoulders. With his pricey suit soaked in some of the alcohol he was carrying, he also appeared rather irate. He pushed Naruto back and onto the ground, saying, "Punk, watch where you're going." Naruto got up and brushed himself off, saying, "Hey look man, I said I'm sorry, it was an accident." He must have had some partners in Japan if he could comprehend Naruto. "An accident? Do you know who you're talking to? Name's Frank Angelo, international businessman. I own the #1 business in France." Kuroka expressed how much he disliked this guy's attitude by saying, "Alright, just cut it out." He said he was sorry NYA. In response, he threw the last of the alcohol in her face. When she made a small statement, she didn't anticipate such a reaction, and the liquid that covered her dress and hair hit her in the face. Her expression changed from shock to rage as she wiped the alcohol from her face and growled angrily at the man. He responded angrily, "Shut it whore, I wasn't talking to you." Kuroka started to whip this guy's ass, but Naruto got there before her. Naruto screamed at him, "I don't give a fuck who you are, you better apologize before cave in." As they awaited the impending fight, the restaurant's entire focus was now on these 2. After glancing at Naruto, he burst out laughing. "You're got some guts, kid. Most people would be on the floor begging for forgiveness. I'll show you why you shouldn't try to be hero though." It was true that a lot of people in the restaurant were aware of Frank's actions outside of his company. Side business. They were aware that playing with this guy was a bad idea. However, Naruto wasn't one of them, and he quickly punched the man in the face. His girls caught him as he staggered back. Naruto cracked his knuckles as 2 of his bodyguards approached him, and he glared at him through his broken glasses, saying, "Boys. It was going to be enjoyable." The park as anticipated, Naruto destroyed all of the thugs in the battle, leaving the confused crowd in his wake. Before they were all unconscious, the poor guys had no idea what had hit them. After attempting to clean up the alcohol that the man had spilled on Kuroka with some napkins, he left for the streets. Although Kuroka hadn't spoken to him the entire way to the park, he couldn't help but glance at her irritated face. What a fool he was. That jerk wouldn't have spilled alcohol on her if he had looked where he was going. She most likely detested him at the moment for spoiling their evening, he sighed. Inside the park, Kuroka and Naruto crossed a bridge that overlooked a river. In an apologetic tone, Naruto said, "Sorry I messed up, if I hadn't been so clumsy that guy wouldn't have ruined your dress." Naruto decided he should apologize to her in some way. After giving him a quick glance, she grinned and said, "It okay, in fact it was pretty fun, NYA. Kuroka laughed. Naruto gave her a perplexed look. It was? I didn't understand what she was saying. She laughed and nodded, saying, "When you dumped hot fudge down his pants it more than made up for it." He looked at her first, then grinned. "Life doesn't get boring with you around Naruto-kun NYA, she replied. Embarrassed by her compliment, he rubbed the back of his neck and said, "It's fun having you around too, you know." As she approached him, she grinned and said, "But I expect another date later to make up for it, okay? NYA. Despite his blush, he smiled and said, "It's a deal." Then, standing there in the moonlight, they both turned to gaze at the water. After 5 days and they went out once more. Azazel said it was okay to spend some time in Paris because they had teleported the users of the sacred gear to Grigori. They traveled throughout Paris, stopping at parks, buildings, and other locations. Naruto could say that he had a great time hanging out with Kuroka. She was entertaining and funny, even though she teased him a lot. Additionally, Naruto trained his new sub-element with Kuroka for a while, and he had to admit that he had nearly mastered it. Unfortunately, Naruto announced that he had to return home to check out something, so their time together was coming to an end. Kuroka claimed to be aware that he was keeping tabs on Ria's peerage. She clarified to him that she was the tiny presence he sensed in the church when Asia was recused and when the stray cat was taken down. She claimed that the only reason she spied on him was because she suspected he was a senjutsu practitioner. He was aware that if he were in her shoes, he would look into another source of senjutsu if he came across one. Additionally, since her sister was a member of the peerage, she periodically checked on her. Then she offered him a spot to watch the raiding game take place. Why were they spying on devils? He wondered. Devils did the same thing, she shot back. He didn't really know how to respond to that. After all, she was a devil, so she would be aware of it, and it was only a raiding game. He was thus waiting for the game to begin while seated in front of a screen alongside Kuroka, Azazel, Baku, and Valley. "Why are you guys interested in this game anyway?" Naruto replied. "Well, now we know that Issei Hyodo has a Longinus, we want to see what it can do," Azazel replied. "Yes, I'm interested in seeing what my rival can do," said Valley. "Rival? Is Issei familiar with this man?" he thought as he turned to face Valley. Baku expressed interest in the game by saying, "It's going to be a good fight, an immortal phoenix versus the Gremari's power of destruction." "Immortal?" asked Naruto. Although he had previously witnessed Ria's use of fire and the power of destruction, he had never heard of immortality. "Yes, the members of the Phoenix family can heal almost instantly from all attacks. Their tears can also heal any injury," Azazel replied. That sounded really difficult for Rias to fight. How could Rias defeat an immortal? As the screen turned on, they heard Graphia say, "The match between Riser Phoenix, Sama and Rias Gremari. Sama will now begin." Naruto noticed that the match's location was surprisingly familiar. It was like noon on a Monday. Why are they at a school, and why is there no one there? The shadow clone he left behind would have told him if everyone had abruptly vanished. Azazel stated plainly, "They can make any platform to fight on." He was surprised by that and thought it sounded really cool. He questioned how devils could accomplish that. Nervously, Naruto bit his lip as the game began and hoped for the best. The thought of Rias becoming a member of Riser's personal harem truly bothered him. He observed Rias and her peerage devise a strategy to counter Riser's peerage. Azazel said, "Smart decision." They had made the decision that Issei and Kaneko would first entice a few people into the gym, after which Akeno would use her electricity magic to blow the entire structure to pieces. As Issei and Kaneko headed for the gym, Naruto watched with trepidation. He watched as they opened the gym door and collided with a rook and a couple of pawns. As Issei faced the pawns, Kaneko sprang into action and engaged the rook. Since Issei was the weakest member of the group, he was more worried about him than about Kaneko. He saw Kaneko engage the rook while avoiding multiple kicks. The woman assaulting her swiped a flaming foot down, barely missing her, and some of her clothing was burned off. With tremendous strength behind them, they fought back and forth in a barrage of punches and kicks. He saw what appeared to be a wind staff user knock Issei into a wall, and his eyes shifted to him. Issei was facing 3 pawns at once, so it was going to be challenging, but maybe he could make it. He sighed as he saw Issei hilariously flee from the green-haired twin girls. He was able to elude the chainsaws they were pursuing him with. He heard Valley say, "I'm severely disappointed." He sighed once more. At least after Ria's training, he appeared to be faster, but that was all. He kept watching until he witnessed Issei approach the 3 girls and apply a magic circle of some kind. When Issei began making hand gestures, his eyes widened, and he pondered what this move might be. Is it possible that he misjudged Issei and that he had grown stronger than he had thought? He saw Issei say, "Dress break," after completing the final motion. All of the girls suddenly torn off clothing, except for Naruto, who face-palmed. Everyone was taken aback by the move. Why? That's the kind of thing only Issei would think of. Valley thought to himself, this can't seriously be him. He couldn't believe his rival was such a pervert. He heard Azazel grinning and say, "I'm not really into the kids, but the blue-haired girl has a good body." He gave Azazel an odd look. Naruto asked, "You're a pervert too?" Gazing slyly at Naruto, Azazel said, I guess you could say that. I've had my fair share of harems over the centuries. I can even give you some tips." Naruto was promptly turned down. Naruto declared, "No way, I'm not like that." He simply wasn't the kind of guy who would have a harem, correct? He watched as all the girls cursed at Issei and ducked to cover their body parts. He simply continued to gaze dreamily at them while grinning. Kaniko's use of the word pervert instantly depressed Issei. They soon left the gym after Kaniko easily defeated her rook. Akeno was just hovering above the building, blushing, when there was a sudden big lighting explosion that completely destroyed the gym in one hit. Recalling some of the things she had threatened to do to him, he shuddered. He heard Grafia say, "2 of Riser Sama's pawns and 1 of his rooks have retired." Kuroka said, "You okay? You look a little shaken up NYA." He simply nodded and shook his head, grinning at her. Naruto turned back to the screen and said, "I'm good." 3 girls setting off traps while meandering through the forest appeared on the screen. As one of the girls set another trap, she remarked, "Man, these traps are pathetic." They all became alert when a dense mist suddenly descended upon them. Another one of them asked, "What's happening?" as Naoto noticed a shadowy figure moving through the area. Abruptly, Kiba emerged from a bush and raced in their direction. As he watched, Kiba quickly removed 3 of the pawns, and they all vanished in a flash of light. 3 of Riser Sama's pawns have retired, Grafia stated. He grinned because it appeared that they were winning. If they could remove 6 pieces with such ease, they had a good chance of winning. When he noticed that Riser had used the remaining pieces, that line of reasoning was interrupted. He observed Yubilana and Akeno engaging in back dot and forth combat with explosions and lighting. After using that attack back there, Akeno appeared to be fairly weak, but she seemed capable of pulling it off. She was severely hurt when Akeno struck her with a lightning strike. Then he watched her clumsily retrieve the liquid vial from the ground. He heard Baku say, "Phoenix tears, she's going to heal herself." That's precisely what happened. As she got back up and began to overwhelm Akeno, it appeared as though she hadn't even been hit in the first place. As he watched Akeno be blasted out of the sky, Naruto clenched his teeth. It must have been cheating or something because those tears were such a huge advantage. Grafia announced over the speaker, "Rias Sama's queen has retired." "That seems so unfair, having a thing that could instantly heal you," Naruto replied. Azazel gave a headshake. With his eyes fixed on the screen, Azazel stated, "The devils made a rule that you could only use them twice per game." Instant heal didn't sound good to Naruto, who still didn't think it was fair. As Kuroka watched Yubilana approach from behind Kaniko and blast her away as well, she clutched the chair. Grafia remarked, "1 of Rias Sama's rooks have retired." This was terrible. Riser still had 6 pieces, but Rias only had 4. Their situation did not appear promising. He saw his sacred equipment begin to glow as he got ready to attack Yubilana, and he saw Issei become furious with her for harming Kaniko. Kiba abruptly burst out of the forest, closely followed by a few other pieces. "Kiba!" exclaimed Issei as she ran in his direction. Kiba also hurried over to them and exclaimed, "Issei, are you alright?" "Back.to. Back," Issei said. "I'm good, but that girl hurt Kaniko-chan." Kiba raised his sword and said, "Issei, we have to work together to take these guys down." As they got ready to move, Issei nodded. Naruto was taken aback when one of the girls revealed that she was Riser's sister. Is his sister in his harem with him? He reflected to himself. He was aware that his thoughts were probably a bit out of the ordinary and that Riser had not engaged in any sexual activity with his sister, but really, Being with her in the midst of that harem business? Sort of screwed up. Then he saw Issei dash over to a girl whose face was half hidden by a mask. He sighed as he witnessed another tiny magic circle being planted. Was that the only move he could employ? As Kiba's opponents turned to face the battle and backed up in rage, he watched Issei use his dress break once more on the orange-haired girl. As Kiba expressed regret for Issei's actions, they began cursing at him. If Issei hadn't followed up with a massive red beam that emerged from his sacred gear and blasted her into the sky, he would have face-palmed once more. Grafia remarked, one of Riser Sama's rooks has retired. Still wearing a furious expression, Valley remarked, at least he can use one of his sacred gear abilities. After doing something bizarre, Issei's sacred gear changed and a massive pillar of green light suddenly erupted from him. Inquiring as to whether this power boost could give them the advantage, Naruto asked, what did he do? He had no idea what the hell Issei had done, but he thought this was good. He leveled up his sacred gear a little. It's not much but it will give him some more power, said Valley. Naruto gave a nod. Perhaps they could succeed. Transfer appeared on Issei's sacred gear as he watched Kiba pierce the ground with his sword. He was shocked to see thousands of swords emerge from the earth and pierce multiple pieces, causing them all to glow and float away as light particles. He heard Grafia say, 2 of Rias Sama's knights, 2 of his pawns, and 1 of his bishops have retired. Like a football fan whose team had just scored a touchdown, Naruto let out a loud cheer. He froze with his hands in the air as he turned to face the strange looks they were giving him. He stammered, sorry, I get excited easily. Issei, of all people, leveled the playing field, and he couldn't help himself. How uncommon that was. Returning to the screen, he witnessed Kiba being destroyed by one of the explosions that Yubulana had set off, making the victory fleeting. Grafia stated, one of Rias Sama's knights has retired. Naruto came dangerously close to biting his lip. The odds were 2 to 3 in Ria's favor because that Revel girl didn't seem interested in fighting. Yubulana withdrew to the area where Asia and Rias were engaged in combat with Riser. After deciding it would be best to pursue her and assist Rias, Issei arrived at the building and stopped Rias. Before sprinting to the roof, Issei declared, Promotion Queen. Naruto had forgotten that he could be promoted to any piece if he entered enemy territory. He smiled slightly because it appeared that Issei would be the decisive factor in this conflict. He firmly stated, this is going down to the wire. Gazing intently at the screen, Baku remarked, yeah, it's a pretty close match. Just in time to witness Rias defending herself against Riser's fire attack, Issei reached the rooftop. Riser's queen floated behind them, and he joined them. Give up Rias, you wouldn't want your precious pawn or bishop to get hurt, would you? He was grinning. Gritting her teeth at what he said, Rias moved forward. With confidence in her voice, she declared, we won't go down without a fight, Riser. This was the last confrontation. Prior to a massive explosion, Rias began to use some of her power. When Naruto saw that Asia and Issei were engulfed in an explosion brought on by Yubulana, his eyes grew wide. Rias's life would end if they were vanquished. Issei unexpectedly used his body to halt the attack, causing a rip in his shirt. The queen promotion appeared to be a wise decision. Asia was eliminated from the game, though, as it appeared that the explosion had completely incapacitated her. Riser was now in a position to win. Shit. It was impossible for Rias to prevail with his queen and himself up against exhausted Rias and Issei. Though he didn't want Rias to marry a jerk who would ruin her life, he hoped that it would happen somehow. Issei was forced to go out and fight since Rias was rapidly losing all of her strength. Issei ran toward Riser as his sacred gear began to glow, and Naruto crossed his fingers. When Naruto saw Issei fall to the ground as his sacred gear lost its power, all of his hopes were crushed. Rias called Issei's name as he slid down the roof. Riser showed up holding him before she could reach him. The words, surrender Rias, came out. She appeared reluctant to do so because she didn't want to live out the rest of her days with him, but Issei's life was in jeopardy. Don't bucko. Keep fighting. Issei uttered a feeble cry. Riser became irritated with Issei's chatter and began striking him, seriously hurting him. Yubulana halted Rias's attempt to approach him, and she was too weak to defend herself. Riser said arrogantly, so Rias? Ready to be my bride? She began, but was interrupted. No, Issei was coughing up blood on the ground. He struggled to stand and said, don't do it, bucko, as all of his strength left him. The fact that this pest continued to obstruct Riser's path infuriated him once more. Issei was punched in the face by Riser, who yelled, be silent. Issei fell to the floor. Riser approached him and began to kick him in the abdomen. As Riser mercilessly beat him into a pulp, He coughed up more blood and saw his life flash before his eyes as blood began to pool around him. There was nothing he could do. Please stop, I surrender. Please just stop hurting him, Rias screamed, pushing past Yubulana, who was grinning, and toward Issei's body. Grafia declared, game over, Rias. Sama has forfeited, Riser Phoenix. Sama is the winner. Grinning at his triumph, Riser turned to leave Rias to hold Issei's battered body. Before she broke down in tears, she heard Issei say, I'm so sorry. After that, the screen turned black. Naruto sat motionless. It was unbelievable to him. They were defeated. He clenched his teeth so tightly that he feared his jaw would crack. Riser was getting married to Rias after he had beaten one of his friends to within an inch of his life without feeling guilty. He was furious at the whole idea and would not allow Riser to get away with it. Baku questioned, you okay, man? He got up and left the room after saying, just fine, I'm leaving now, unable to control the rage on his face. Kuroka came right up behind him. I was expecting Kuroka to get mad since that redhead girl's peerage is now going to be practically under Riser's control, so her little sister is going to be owned by that guy. Baku said loudly. Although Azazel nodded, he had previously learned of Naruto's affiliation with these devils. In fact, Kuroka had told him about it when she first witnessed him vanquish a stray devil. Based on his knowledge of Naruto, Azazel anticipated that he would become enraged because he was devoted to his friends. With a sigh, he hoped that Naruto would refrain from blowing Riser's head off. Outside the space, Kuroka said, what are you doing, Naruto? His voice was angry as he said, well, isn't it obvious? I'm going to go bash Riser's head into the ground. Do you even know where Gremory territory is? NYA? She inquired. When he halted, he sighed because he didn't know how to get to the Gremory ground. After calming down, he asked, how'd I get there? She was serious when she said, I'll take you there. There's no way I'd let a person like Riser have control over my little sister. I can't go there for obvious reasons, so I'm trusting you to get this done, okay? She loved her sister dearly and couldn't let that harem-loving weirdo control her. He grinned and said, I promise there is no way I'm going to screw this up. She nodded, appreciative that he was helping her and her sister. He nodded, sighing, I'll drop you off close to the Gremory mansion when the wedding starts, okay, NYA. He knew he would have to wait a long time for the wedding to begin, but when it did, Riser was being handed his ass. 3 days later, the wedding ceremony. Right now, Naruto was feeling pretty good. He was wearing a wedding tux that Azazel had given him, and it felt like he was some kind of secret agent who was going to go to this ceremony and crush Riser. Kuroka purred in his ear from behind him, you look really handsome, Naruto-kun. He grinned and blushed slightly. Naruto turned to Kuroka and nodded, saying, thanks, but we should get going. Naruto nodded. It made sense. Kaneko was likely preoccupied with fighting and witnessing him kill that stray at the time. You'll have to get away from me as soon as we appear. I might be able to his myself with senjutsu, but my sister might catch my scent unlike the times when you were fighting against that stray and those fallen angels because she'll be more focused on her surroundings. He replied, okay, I'll make sure to head straight inside after we get there. She used a magic circle, and they vanished in a dazzling burst of light. Seiden's domain outside the Gremory Manor, where the wedding was to take place, Naruto and Kuroka appeared. He had to admit that the place was probably larger than any palace he had seen in the elemental nations, and the front yard was enormous, with a tall gate lined with bricks and small trees on either side. A large fountain gushed crystal clear water from the gate, and behind that was what he could only describe as the largest mansion he had ever seen. Naruto exclaimed in disbelief, Rias family owns all this. In reality, she owns territory the size of a huge city in Japan, Kuroka says with a smile. But that's not important, you better get going. Naruto shook his head, attempting to hide his surprise at how much Rias owned. He moved away from her and headed to the house, hearing Kuroka say, and Naruto. He stood and turned to face her, and she grinned as he said, kick his ass NYA. He congratulated her, saying, you did it. She grinned slightly, almost feeling sorry for Riser, before turning on a magic circle and returning to fallen angel territory as he shouted as he ran towards the mansion. Naruto hid behind the gate wall, inspecting guests entering the house through the gates. He knew that if he didn't want to break the barrier surrounding this house and alert the guards, he had to go through the gate. He considered changing into one of those guests and sneaking in, but the guards could tell that he wasn't a devil, so he closed his eyes and thought of ways to get inside without alerting them. His eyes snapped open, thinking, what the hell am I doing? He was going to go through the front gate and show everyone not to fuck with him, but he stopped and looked at the tree. He snapped his fingers as another thought came to him, and he pulled out a Hiroshin kunai, turning around and firmly implanting it inside a tree. This gave him an easy way to enter the underworld without someone having to teleport him. When he finished that, he turned around and headed for the front gate. The guards noticed him coming and moved to stop him. "Cease. Who are you? You're not allowed in here," said one of the guards. Naruto just brushed off his hand and walked past him. He didn't make it very far when a spear was thrust at him. He grabbed the spear without looking and shattered it by squeezing his hand. The devil stumbled back in surprise before Naruto turned around and kicked him in the head, sending him crashing back into the gate. The gate broke down as the devil crashed into it. Many of the party guests and devil guards started to take up defensive positions. Naruto smirked as dozens of devils started to swarm him, all intent on taking him down. He dodged to the left as another guard tried to slash him across the face, and delivered a quick punch to the man's stomach, knocking him out cold. He jumped upwards as some balls made of purple energy tried to attack him but just missed and exploded behind him. He descended upon the person who fired those at him and delivered a kick to his face. The man was knocked out in one hit, and multiple other devils tried to shoot dark red beams at him. In order to avoid the beams, he dodged left, leapt up, and threw several Hiroshin kunai at the small group while in the air. He then vanished in a flash of yellow, reappeared in front of them, and kicked them all away at once. More people charged at him, but he simply dodged all of their punches and used magic to bat them away like flies. He proceeded to the entrance of the wedding ceremony, punching and kicking everyone until they were knocked out cold with a single blow from Naruto. He bowed back to avoid another kick before delivering a knee to a man's abdomen, causing him to cough up blood before collapsing to the ground. Naruto turned back to the large set of doors where the wedding was being held, and just as he was about to knock it down, he heard someone shout, "Naruto!" He heard Issei's startled voice ask, "What are you doing here?" and turned to face Issei in confusion. "What are you doing here?" Issei's activated sacred gear caught me off guard. "I'm here to save Bucko. There's no way I'll let her marry Riser," replied Issei. "Let's save her together, okay? I'm here for the same reason," Naruto grinned. Naruto stormed through the ceremony's doors before Issei could ask any more questions. Riser turned to see the chaos and became enraged at what he saw as everyone in the room gasped and turned to face them. "Get them, you idiots!" Riser shouted. As the guards raced towards them, the rest of Ria's peerage moved to try and stop them, but before they could they heard Naruto say, "Been wanting to try this out for a while." The guards were closing on him and Issei. Issei rose his sacred gear up, prepared to defend himself. Naruto just stood there calmly until the guards came with a few feet of them. "Chidori stream," Naruto said. Lighting started so spread out from his body in different directions, it reached the area where the guards were and shocked them violently. Their screams were heard all throughout the hall as the lighting kept zapping them. Finally they fell to the ground twitching as the jutsu fried them. Naruto walked past them without a care in the world. Issei followed behind him warily. Rias was absolutely shocked. How the hell did Naruto get here? That didn't matter. What did though was that both him and Issei had fought through dozens of guards and crashed this wedding for her. Well, actually Naruto did, but she didn't know that. Naruto declared, "This wedding is over." There was no time for disagreement. Riser chuckled and said, "It doesn't matter what you want, this wedding is happening." Issei yelled, "We'll be long dead before you could dream about marrying Bucko." Riser growled and lit his hand on fire. Naruto backed him up by saying, "That's right, Rias is coming with us." This only made Riser even more irate. "And who are you to make such a demand? I'm Riser Phoenix, the pride of the Phoenix family, and you're just a lowly peasant, so disappointing that your parents practically begged for someone to take you in so they didn't have to deal with you." Riser laughed, thinking he had completely insulted Naruto, and then everyone gasped in shock as a dark aura descended upon them. Naruto stood in the center, his hair obscuring his eyes, and they had no idea how much that reacted to him. The mere mention of his parents was enough to make him depressed for the entire day. He raised his head to reveal dark red eyes with slits running down the middle, and most of the room backed up in fear of this beast, even Rias and her peerage feeling a little afraid of Naruto. Lucifer. Sama, please get rid of this pest," Riser said, feeling a little scared. Meanwhile Sirzex was busy sweating at the sight of the boy in front of them. While everyone was getting a small dose of his power, Sirzex could see it all clearly. This man, no being, was powerful beyond belief. He identified this powerful being as the mage that Rias said had been helping her peerage, but she didn't mention he was this powerful. His guess was that Naruto didn't exactly want to reveal his power to the world yet, and that comment from Riser had been enough to realize his restraints a little. Obviously he wasn't here to destroy any of them, or else he would be blowing up half the underworld right now. This was disturbing. Usually powerful beings like him only came around for extremely important reasons, so why was he trying to help his sister? He could see that he actually wanted to stop this marriage and would do anything to do it, but why? He didn't know. Any answer he came up with didn't make sense. For now he wouldn't question if Naruto wanted to help, he would take it and get Rias out of this marriage, so he decided to speak. Pardon Riser's stupidity, but what were you here to discuss? Searsex spoke in a soothing tone. After a few moments, Naruto calmed himself down and opened his eyes to reveal his typical inviting blue eyes and spoke in a friendly tone. Calm down, kid. If you keep this up you'll release one of my tails, Kurama said from inside his head. Knowing that the man in front of him was the head Mao from the textbooks he had read, Naruto declared, I do not think this wedding should happen, it's not right to have Rias forcibly marry someone. You think so of Issei, don't you? The fact that the king of the underworld knew Issei's name took him by surprise. Searsex said, identifying his sister's pawn. Issei stood straight as a soldier and said, why? Yes sir, there is no way I'll let someone like Riser marry Bucko. Searsex grinned and said, then it's decided we shall have a battle to decide. Riser turned to Searsex, his face showing surprise. What do you mean, Lucifer? Sama, this marriage is final, he declared. Since I had to give them a prize to compete for and this happy occasion deserved some entertainment, I actually invited them to come. If they wanted to, I had to make it happen. Searsex played on his pride when he said, unless you don't want to fight them for the crowd. Riser. Naruto appeared perplexed. He had expected some opposition from Rias' brother, but it appeared that he wanted this marriage to be dissolved. He was also perplexed when Searsex claimed to have invited him here despite never having spoken to the man. What do you mean? Riser narrowed his eyes and spoke. Well, it's just that you had so much more experience than Rias. Chan, having played 10 rating games, but you barely won with only 2 pieces left willing to fight. Searsex continued to smile. Riser became even more enraged when Searsex said, I just think you were losing your touch and that you didn't want to risk another fight with such high consequences. Still doubting his ability to defeat Naruto alone, Riser said, no please, I'll show you my power by defeating them, it just seems unfair that it's 2 versus 1. Searsex nodded, understanding that the number of people on his team didn't really matter. How about this, it will be those 2 against you and your peerage. Searsex declared, why not? It would be entertaining to see Riser lose with his whole peerage behind him. The entire hall was taken aback by his declaration, which was impossible odds to overcome. Rias glared at her brother, asking why he would give her a chance to escape and then take it away just as quickly. Riser grinned, too focused on his certain victory to wonder why Searsex had given him those odds. Rias stood up and said, Oni. Sama, surely you can give them a better chance. Searsex firmly told his sister, no, to get this reward they have to earn it. Rias gritted her teeth but retreated out of concern for Issei and Naruto's safety. Now that this issue is resolved, everyone will you please head to the arena for the match? Searsex said loudly, and everyone stood up and made their way to the arena, undoubtedly wondering how Naruto and Issei would fare against Riser's peerage. Rias watched her brother escort Issei and Naruto off, giving them one final worried glance before being dragged away by her peerage. The arena. Uzumaki Naruto and Hyodo Issei are up against Riser Phoenix and peerage in this challenge. Would you mind telling me what your prize would be if you won? Just to be clear. Wealth, notoriety, attractive women? Issei appeared tempted at Searsex's final remark before Naruto struck him across the head. Searsex said this in front of the large crowd. As the audience muttered among themselves, Naruto declared, we would like the marriage between Riser and Rias to be cancelled. Very well, said Searsex with a smile, that will be your reward. Searsex said, let the game begin. He then activated a magic circle, and Naruto and Issei were taken to a massive chessboard with enormous chess pieces on it. The sky was red and covered in dark clouds, and everyone in the arena watched as they got ready for battle. Gazing at Riser's peers, who were all grinning at them, Naruto remarked, Issei let me handle most of them. Not at all. They will be astounded by what I have. In response, Issei activated his sacred gear. Naruto was shocked to discover that Issei was actually far more powerful than he was in the rating game when he examined his power levels. Naruto muttered, what did you do? As he wondered how Issei had acquired this power in just 3 days. I can currently only use my Sacred Gear's Balance Breaker power-up for 10 seconds before my energy runs out. Look, Issei, that might work if you went against Riser only, Naruto said after nodding. But since we're going against his peerage, I'll take on some of the higher pieces for the time being, and you take on the pawns. You should use that balance breaker when we get to Riser, Issei said with a grunt, but she nodded, understanding that Naruto was correct. Riser ridiculed Naruto's power display, saying, are you done talking? I don't even know why Lord Lucifer is allowing such a worthless human compete. Naruto, who was simply waiting for the first blow, was unaffected by his remark. Too scared to speak? Aboard Riser snapped his fingers and said, "All right. Let's get this over with." 3 of his pawns and 2 of his knights moved forward. Even Issei took down more pieces than this with Kiba, so he's too overconfident if he thinks that could beat us with just them, Naruto thought. A girl with light brown hair and what appeared to be medieval knight armor said, "On behalf of Lord Riser, you will fall here by my blade." A woman with purple hair tied up in a ponytail on top of her head said, "Yes, Lord Riser wouldn't be happy if we were to lose to some pathetic human." "All right, Issei, let's go." Issei nodded and sprinted in the direction of the wind staff user and the chainsaw twins as Naruto yelled as he approached the women in armor. The woman raised her sword to defend herself as Naruto closed in, and when he finally reached her, she chose to slash her sword down on him. Naruto swiftly deflected the attack with a kunai. Sparks flew when they made contact, and Naruto pouted a little. Since she was much weaker than one of his previous opponents, this would not be enjoyable at all. Naruto swiftly spun and threw her into the purple-haired woman who had just attempted to sneak up on him, causing them both to tumble back into the ground. A few seconds later, the purple-haired woman got up with an irritated sound, but before she could move, a devastating elbow connected with her head, sending her face first into the ground. Blood spurted from her mouth as she lay there in the small crater. A flaming sword passed by, forcing Naruto to tilt his head backwards. The woman gritted her teeth, furious that she couldn't hit him, and carried on with her attack, so he ducked, dodged to the left, and then leapt over her, avoiding all of her blows. He then landed on the ground and gave her a sweep kick, knocking her to the ground before smiling and holding out his hand, which was surrounded by a blue mist that took the shape of a sword, and as the mist came together, an ice sword emerged. The new sub-element he had learned was Ice Style. When he first arrived, he had tried to unlock this because he wanted to use it to remember Haku and what he had taught him about protecting his precious people. He had finally unlocked it on his trip with Kuroka, and he was just waiting to use it. He positioned the sword ready to strike as the woman closed in on him, and as they engaged in a fierce sword battle, Naruto swiped left and right, giving her some shallow cuts while blocking all of her attacks. She attacked again, only to be blocked once more. Her expression was angry. "How is your sword not melting? It's illogical. Chakra made this style strong." He recalled that on that mission, not even Sasuke's fireball jutsu could hope to melt Haku's ice. She screamed out in frustration, and he smiled as she fought for dominance. Naruto took advantage of the fact that their arms were raised high in the air, and he head-butted hard, sending her flying back to the ground again before she could blink. She managed to block the attack by bringing her sword up, but her victory was short-lived as she saw it crack, and her eyes widened when her sword completely shattered due to the force Naruto put on it. She looked scared as Naruto approached her, his sword ready to strike, ducked as the purple-haired woman flew over him, and then thrust his hand forward, causing the sword to go straight into her stomach. The announcer said, "One of Riser Sama's knights has retired." Naruto turned back to the woman on the ground, who was staring at him with a hint of confusion, and he sighed as he brought the sword down on her. A few moments later, she began to glow and scatter away, and he turned back around and let his sword disappear into mist. He turned to his left and saw Issei smiling, with 3 naked women behind him. Naruto's face palmed and blushed a little at their nude bodies. "What a big pervert you are. Why would you harm us once more?" a young girl with green hair said. Issei ignored their profanities and kept staring at them with love in his eyes. A whistling Naruto carelessly tossed a rock up and down, nailing him in the back of the head. Naruto jerked his head at Riser, who was ordering more of his pieces to join the fight, saying, "Look, can you hurry up with this? Issei looks like Riser isn't happy." Issei shook himself out of his perverted fantasies and raised his sacred gear at the girls, thrusting it forward. A huge red beam emerged from Issei's hand, blowing the girls sky high. Naruto was clearly impressed. That attack could probably destroy a small part of a mountain, which it did. The announcer said, 3 of Riser Sama's pawns have retired." Riser clenched his teeth, wondering how this useless pawn and this pitiful mother could remove so many of his pieces. He was determined not to let this marriage slip away from him. "Every one of my slaves attacks." He gave the order, and they followed their master's instructions and moved forward. Naruto pushed Issei aside as he leapt over both of Riser's rooks, who were about to pound them. He suddenly moved quickly and got right next to Issei. Even if it were all the pawns, Issei could not possibly take on all these pieces. Naruto yelled at him, "Keep your head in the game." Issei shook his head on the ground, saying, "Just keep them off me for a while, I need some time to power up." Before he was compelled to act, Naruto heard a voice from his sacred gear say, "Boost," Issei said, moving behind him. The majority of Riser's peers were taken aback when he announced, "Ice Style. Frost Wall Jutsu." He slammed his hands into the ground and said, "Ice Style. Frost Wall Jutsu." Suddenly, a massive barrier of ice the size of a small building appeared out of the ground and blocked all of the attackers out. Yabolana and Riser's rooks were hurling attacks at the wall, but it was barely doing any damage. Then, hundreds of spikes burst through the wall, which must have been at least 10 yards away. This mage was who? In the box of Satan. That's pretty amazing. I assume that's why you called us out here, Ajuka said. That was fantastic, Sir Fall said in a childish tone. Yay, based on what we've seen, it appears that he specializes in ice magic. Falbium said, genuinely not bored for once. Sir Fall gave a victory sign and said, he's good, but he can't compete with me. Circex grinned at her actions, but ironically, he knew Sir Fall would lose the fight with Naruto. Everyone turned to Circex, surprised that he would say such a thing, and he said, I'm not so sure about that. Sir Fall was the best ice magic user they had ever encountered. Sadly, Sir Fall lowered her head and said, how could you say that, Circex? Chan. Circex said simply, take a look at his power levels. They all followed his instructions and discovered something pretty intriguing. He is reserving a great deal. How much I'm not sure, Ajuka remarked, showing some interest in the mage with white hair. He flared some of it during the ceremony, and I discovered how strong he is. The rest of them stared in shock as Circex said, if I had to guess, he is some sort of extremely powerful being like the infinite dragon god. Are you certain? With a hint of concern in his voice, Ajuka said, that's a pretty bold statement to make. I'm pretty sure unless he did something to make it seem like he had more power than he actually possessed, said Circex. Falbium said, well, what do we do? They all agreed that they detested the idea of forcing people to marry, so they essentially didn't care if this marriage ended. Nothing. He is helping my sister get out of this marriage and I should be thanking him, not finding out ways to deal with him. Circex smiled. What could possess a being like himself to prevent a wealthy devil from marrying? Ajuka asked, why would he come here to save your sister? Circex leaned back in his chair and said, I don't know, but for now he's not a threat and we should keep this under wraps. Besides, I have something he could all help us out with later. The other Satans were undoubtedly more intrigued by this Uzumaki. The arena. You are a piece of garbage. I won't allow you to destroy this union. With his sacred gear glowing, Issei jumped back in beside Naruto as Riser yelled for his remaining pieces to attack. Issei grinned and said, that ice thing you did was like totally cool. Naruto, getting ready for battle, replied, yeah, can you fight now? Yes, you can bet that I now have 12 times my usual power, sweetie. Naruto nodded and hurried forward to take a punch from one of Riser's rooks after he said this loudly. After throwing her back with a kick, he said, okay, there's only 4 now, let's take them together. Issei nodded and charged at the other rook, engaging her in hand-to. Hand combat. One of the bishops got up and attempted to unleash a barrage of magic beams at Naruto and Issei, who both avoided the beams while continuing to battle the rooks in front of them. Fire style. Fire Dragon Jutsu. Naruto yelled while breathing fire out of his mouth as he dodged at another beam and threw a right hook at his opponent. She raised her arms to block the blow, but grunted at the force behind it. She skidded back a little but didn't give, going at him with more vigor, trying to put him down. She threw a punch at his face, but he just ducked underneath it while grabbing her arm and sighed. She then threw her straight at the bishop floating in the sky who was trying to blast them away. The announcer over the speaker said, one of Riser Sama's bishops and one of his rooks have retired. Naruto walked over to Issei and gave him a thumbs up. Nice job, now only one left. Naruto pointed to an enraged Riser. The fire transformed into a huge dragon with yellow eyes that looked menacing and deadly, giving off a loud roar before dashing towards the 2 downed women. The heat and light from the explosion could make anyone's skin. Riser lit his entire body on fire before yelling and charging at them, saying, How could this lowly devil and this nameless mage destroy his entire peerage? He would not stand for it, they would die here and now. This is it. Activate your balance breaker, Issei, Naruto shouted, and Issei nodded as his sacred began to glow. Suddenly, his sacred gear began to spread from his arm to his main body, and before long, Issei was completely transformed, covered in several green orbs and a red type of armor. Boosted gear. Balance breaker scale male. Issei yelled loudly before charging to meet Riser in the center. Riser spit out a little as a hard punch hit his stomach, sending him flying toward one of the enormous chess pieces, which caused a huge hole when he crashed into it. Naruto was undoubtedly impressed because that was an incredible amount of power Issei used to deliver that punch, not to mention that this transformation was badass. When Riser sat up, the ruble fell off him, and he rubbed his head, a little dazed. But Issei was there again in a flash, punching him in the face as he went through the chess piece this time, and when he came out the other side, he was still flying, and Naruto was right there, wanting to punish Riser for all the trouble he had caused. Issei was up there waiting for Riser to throw another punch at him, but Riser unexpectedly recovered and sprouted his flaming wings, blasting Issei with a huge torrent of fire. Issei flew through the air as Riser prepared huge discs of fire to throw at Issei. Naruto quickly tried to divert Riser's attention by going through more seals. As Riser rapidly approaches the ground, Naruto backflipped, hitting him with a bone crushing kick that landed directly on his chin, causing blood to spill out of his mouth. Spitting several concentrated streams of water through his mouth, he said, "Water style, water cannon jutsu." Riser had to avoid all of the streams of water, but one struck him, sending him plummeting to the ground before he was able to correct himself in mid-fall. He growled and flew directly to Naruto, his fist cocked back, but his hand never made it because Naruto was already there, sending him flying through the air and onto the ground with a kick to the face. He yelled as he got back up and charged at Naruto again, but Naruto just ducked under his falling hand and punched him in the abdomen. Riser grunted and got ready to strike again, but a punch struck his face, then his stomach, then his chest, then a kick to the side of his face, until Naruto pounded him mercilessly, leaving Riser had no chance. As the glowing fist descended upon Riser, he looked up in horror. Naruto abruptly stopped his fist in front of a young girl's face and said, "Please stop hurting him." Revel, who Naruto knew to be Riser's sister, threw her hands up in front of Riser. "Why?" Her face flushed beneath Naruto's intense gaze as he asked, "He caused a lot of pain to my friends for his own selfish desires. I apologize for hurting your friends, and I know my brother can be pretty foolish, but I will stop at nothing to keep him safe. Please, he just needed some humbling. Maybe this defeat can show him not to be so foolish. He's learned his lesson and he will never do something like this ever again. I'll make sure of it." Naruto paused at her words and looked at the battered and broken Riser, who was holding his head down. He assumed that Riser had received quite the punishment at his hands, so perhaps if he was willing to change, Naruto would let him go. He then turned back to Revel and grinning. Naruto smiled at her and said, "Okay, but he better not do anything. Who knows if you'll be there next time to save his ass." She blushed at his warm smile and his inviting blue eyes, which were the most lively and warm she had ever seen in her life. Revel was abruptly pushed forward into Naruto as he caught her. "I'm going to win." With Revel screaming in his arms, Naruto dodged left, ran around one of the chess pieces, and sat Revel down on the floor as Riser screamed and shot a massive stream of fire at them both. Revel, on the other hand, was shocked that her brother would do that. Naruto peered around the chess piece and became surprised when he saw Issei, who was only wearing armor on one arm, fighting Riser in the middle of the floor. He saw Riser and Issei punch each other in the face simultaneously, sending them both flying in opposite directions. She could have been seriously injured in that blast, but it didn't seem like Riser cared at all. Did she really mean so little to him that he would use her as a distraction? While Revel watched from the safety of cover, Naruto rushed toward Issei and Riser and said, "Stay here, this'll be over soon." "How? Even with that holy equipment, you cannot hold that cross. You gave up your arm for it, didn't you?" Riser shouted, and Naruto's startled expression shifted to the sweaty, panting Issei. "I certainly did." Issei yelled back, "Even if I had to give up my arm, stopping you from marrying Bucko was an arm well spent." Naruto was completely taken aback by this. He didn't think that Issei would go to such lengths to beat Riser, but it seemed like he had a lot of courage in Issei that he hadn't seen before. Although they had only known Rias for a month or two, Issei had just demonstrated his unwavering loyalty to his king, and for once it wasn't about trying to get into someone's pants. He genuinely wanted to protect Ria's happiness, and if she wasn't grateful when this whole thing was over, Naruto didn't know what was wrong with her. As Issei and Riser turned to face him, Naruto remarked, "Issei, pounding this guy isn't going to work, we need to do something else." "What should we do, in your opinion?" Issei inquired as Riser took a slight step back. "Are you strong enough to launch another attack?" As Riser raised a ball of fire, Naruto began going through signs. Issei smirked and said, "Plenty." Holding up his arm, Issei said, "I don't know if this would work with chakra like it did with magic, but he would give it a try." Naruto said, "Ice style. Frosted earth." As the ice began to spread across the floor, it turned into ice, and in some places, enormous spikes emerged from the ground, all of which was directly aimed at Issei. He lowered his sacred gear as all of the ice entered his sacred, and a symbol emerged. Move. It said before ice erupted from his location in all directions. The chakra Naruto put into the jutsu was so great that the ice froze anything in the surrounding area. The gigantic pieces were completely frozen over. If you stepped anywhere you would slip. Giant spikes were jetting out of the ground as far as the eye could see. In the middle of it all was a riser completely frozen in a thick block of ice. Issei looked down at his sacred gear amazed at how it could cause all of this. Awesome. He rubbed the back of his head as Naruto released his domed wall jutsu, and both Naruto and Revel emerged unharmed. He yelled, jumping around before slipping and hitting the ground. Are you sleeping, Issei? Naruto remarked as he observed Issei snoring on the ground. Riser. Sama can no longer continue. The winners are Uzumaki Naruto and Hyodo Issei. The announcer said. Naruto grinned as if that was game, and they were all teleported away as the magic circle materialized beneath them. The arena Searsex arose from Satan's booth and declared, as declared by the challengers upon their victory, the marriage between Riser Phoenix and my sister is cancelled. Rias and her peerage immediately ran towards them, and Rias immediately fell to the ground, placing Issei in her lap and holding him close. As the arena came into view, they were greeted by hundreds of stunned devils who were all shocked by the display of power and how two people took down Riser's peerage. She looked down at him and smiled softly, saying, "You did. I'm really grateful you guys do all this for me." Rias was touched that Issei would go to such lengths as giving his arm away to keep her happy. "Bucko, we beat them," Issei said weakly. "I'll see you when I wake up, Bucko," Issei said as he fell asleep, and Rias continued to smile before giving him to Kiba, who turned around and jumped into Naruto's arms. He was taken aback, but he gave it back, feeling some of the joy radiating from her. "Thank you, Naruto, but I must ask how you knew we would lose." He laughed as she playfully broke the hug and asked, "Did you have such little faith in us?" This was a good moment, and she wouldn't ruin it by asking him a lot of questions. For the time being, she would just be content that she could marry whoever she wanted to. "No, let's just say I have my ways," he replied, hoping that would satisfy her. He didn't want to explain that he was watching the match back at Grigori headquarters. She gave him a suspicious look before giving up and smiling. Yes, it was a good day.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.